And we're live. All right, Shawn, welcome aboard, man. Thank you. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
You're one of those guys that came up so many times on Twitter, I had to reach out to you. So many people were like, have you checked out what this guy's doing? He's eating nothing but meat, and he's a doctor, and he's super healthy. I was like, okay, let me check out what this guy's doing. And then I saw you, and I was like, he's serious about this. And I was like, okay, this isn't a gimmick. You're actually an educated guy, and you're pursuing this carnivore diet.
Yeah, I mean, it's, if you would have asked me...
Pull this thing up close to you if you could. There you go.
If you would have asked me 2 years ago, I would have said, that's fucking crazy. I mean, that's what I would have said. If you would have asked me even 5 years ago, I'd say, yeah, diet doesn't really matter that much, just train your ass off, because I had been an athlete just training my whole life. And, I didn't really, until I got in my mid-40s, and then all of a sudden I was like, crap, training ain't working. I'm getting fat. I'm getting, high blood pressure. I'm probably pre-diabetic. And then I went down this, this dietary journey where I went from, doing the low-fat, low-calorie fish and vegetables, almost vegetarian, training 3 times a day, just about trying to get lean. And then I went down to, then I was like, man, this sucks. I'm miserable. I can't maintain this. Then I went on the paleo diet. Started looking, I was like, man, bacon looks pretty good. And then I started reading some more. Then I went on to, low carb, high fat. And then I did ketogenic for about 2-3 years, because I think you do stuff like that too.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just started reading about these people that do this carnivore diet. And then I started reading.
Where'd you read about it?
Well, there's actually a Facebook group. It's called Zeroing In on Health. There's a guy named Charles Washington. He's been doing it about 10 years. And so they got about 13,000 people.
So he's been exclusively on a carnivorous diet for 10 years?
10 years. Yep.
So no vegetables, no carbs, no nothing?
Nope. I mean, he basically eats, I think he eats steak and pork ribs, stuff like that. And there's another guy, I mean, this is more impressive. There's a guy named Joe Anderson and his wife, Shawn. They've been doing it for 20 years. And I could probably show you a picture of that guy, but he's 60 and he looks like he's 30. His wife is in his mid-40s and she looks like she's 25. By looking at these people, you're like, they're crazy healthy. What happened was she had Lyme disease real bad and was kind of overweight and really sick. And he started doing like the same stuff I was doing. He's reading about these old school bodybuilders. I don't know if you remember a guy named Vince Caranda. So he promoted this steak and eggs diet back in the 1950s, 60s, and he was just jacked. This is 1956. It was kind of before most of the steroid stuff was hitting. There were still some steroids back in the 1940s. The Nazis played with that with the troops, but it didn't really get into the bodybuilding culture till probably the 60s, and then the 70s. Now it's everywhere, right? But he was doing this stuff, and if you look up Vince Caranda and look at his physique from the 1940s, 1950s, he's friggin' pretty amazing.
And he's just eating meat.
He was eating. His diet was basically, I think it was 5 days of just eating meat and eggs. It was steak and eggs, and then every one day, like every fifth or sixth day, you could eat whatever. So that's what he did. So that was his diet. So that's what he looked like back in that's probably in the 50s.
Wow.
So that's pretty decent for back then.
Pretty jacked.
Well, for a non-steroid guy.
Also taking into consideration how little they really knew about training back then, right?
They didn't know. If you go back into history, we can talk about that. But then there was a guy named Larry Scott who was like the first Mr. Olympia, and he was another guy that was eating just tons of meat, 4 or 5 pounds of meat a day, and he won Mr. Olympia. And there's some of their drug use, and some of this stuff. But I was just reading about this stuff, and I was just like, well, I'm an athlete. I like trying this stuff, and so I said, well, I'm just going to try it for a month. And so I did it for a month, and I was like, man, I feel pretty good, right? So I was like, well, I did a month, and I'm like, well, I'm going to go back to my ketogenic diet, and so I started. Remember the day I did, I was like, I'm going to eat some apples, a little almond butter, I had some berries and cream, stuff you'd normally eat as a treat. And I just didn't feel as good. Like my back started hurting a little bit. And I was like, well, maybe that's where so then I went and said, well, I'm just going to go back to eating meat again.
Wait, your back started hurting from eating apples?
Well, it was just like, this is one of the things that I've seen, and we can talk about this, in detail, but I've seen a lot of people, what they'll say is, and this is what I saw, when I was working as a surgeon, when I put people on a ketogenic diet, their joint pain was starting to go away.
Right.
This is pretty common.
A lot of people believe that joint pain is connected to the consumption of simple carbohydrates.
Well, I think it's,
refined carbohydrates.
I don't know what it is for sure, but it's something we eat most in a lot of cases. Not always, but I think there's something out there we're eating. I'm pretty convinced it's not meat. That's what I can tell you for sure from what I know. whether it's sugar, whether it's processed gluten or wheat or stuff like that, whether it's vegetable oil, whether it's or even some vegetables potentially. And so this is what I'm seeing, and this is what I saw. I studied these large Facebook groups like an anthropologist. Like they used to study these people. 100 years ago, they'd go out, Weston Price would go out and see all these people and study their teeth and stuff. The problem with that is, you don't speak their language. It's pretty remote. You got to translate. And so some of those observations, while they're valid, they're hard to do now. But so when you go on these groups and you just all you can do is like reading this like a scientist, going, okay, this guy went on this diet and his joint went away. This guy went on this diet and his thyroid disease went away. This guy went on this diet and his skin got, psoriasis went away. And I kept seeing this over and over and over and over again. I mean, thousands of them.
But the big thing for most people is removing refined carbohydrates, removing sugar, and a lot of people dairy.
Yeah, I would say that that's a good strategy for most people. Here's the deal. I don't care what people eat. You eat whatever makes you healthy. I think this is the thing. We have these national guidelines that tell people what to eat, but they don't work for most people. Obviously. I mean, look at our country. I mean, it's sad to see all these people that are, really, really getting sick. And so I think, there's a guy named Vinnie Tortorich who has this no sugar, no grain. I think that will successfully help a huge percentage of people. But I think you have to be objective about it. You have to do it long enough for it to have an effect. And I think you have to, be really clinical about it. And so one of the big problems I see as a physician, and this is a big problem, because people will go on low carb diets or ketogenic diets, and they'll say, I feel the best I've ever felt in my life. I mean, my mood is better, my mental cognition is better, my joints feel better, my guts don't hurt, my skin is better, my sex drive is better. Everything you would say is that means you're getting healthy. And they'll go to their doctor and they'll get some blood drawn and their cholesterol will be high. And their doctor will say, well, you're going to kill yourself. You're going to have a heart attack, right? So people get scared away from that and they go back to eating their other stuff and then they feel crappy again. But they're like, well, at least my cholesterol is not bad. So one of the big problems, and I'm trying to sort of basically preaching this stuff, is I think, and this is a problem with healthcare in general, is we have so gotten away from just defining what's healthy. If somebody comes into your office and you say, you talk to them for 2-3 minutes, because healthcare is just, you got 10 minutes to see a patient, make a decision. So what you're going to do is like, hi, how you doing? Order a bunch of labs. You look at the results of the labs and say, okay, this lab's low, this lab's high, this lab's normal. Go on this drug, or do this or that. And the patient may be saying, well, but I feel great. Or maybe converse, they may say, I feel like crap. Well, your labs look fine, so go exercise a little bit or something.
Well, let me bring you back to the beginning. So you're a physician, right? So
right.
You understand a lot about the human body. Were you worried when you decided to go on this carnivore-only diet? Were you worried that you were going to be deficient in some sort of nutrients and vitamins and fiber and all these different things? And were you cautious?
Yeah, I mean, I was very, I'm still skeptical. I mean, that's just the way you should be. But I mean, I was aware of what's not in meat. If you look at the RDA, and it says meat is low in vitamin C, it's low in manganese, it's low in, potassium, it's low in, vitamin A, vitamin E. There's a whole bunch of things it's low in, on paper, right? So I was like, well, I can't rectify why these people are doing so well. Just eating meat. And we know historically that there are populations out there, the Inuit, the Maasai, the Sami, and all these people.
The Inuit's probably the best example, right? Because they had an extremely low incidence of cancer and no vegetables. There's nothing up there.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to northern Alaska in the wintertime, good luck trying to find a fruit or vegetable. I mean,
right.
You're not. And so, but what people would say, well, they would justify, say, yeah, but they ate a lot of their organs and they got some vitamin C from their liver. And some of the whale skin had some, and so they would just try to justify that and try to make this is how it worked. And then the same thing with Maasai, they would say, well, sometimes they would eat some berries once in a while. So they would always try to justify it. I'm like, those things aren't available year round. So you can't get berries, especially in Alaska or wherever the Inuit are. You can't get that 12 months out of the year.
So that's not what's having a significant impact on their diet.
I don't think so.
It's coming from the meat itself.
Well, this is what I, after doing a lot of research on this stuff, so we've known, so it's interesting. So when we look at the development of the RDAs, the recommended daily allowances, those were developed back in the 1940s, and they were developed basically for soldiers to figure out what the heck you're supposed to feed people so they can survive. And so they did research on this, and what they did was they take populations of people that are consuming a normal diet, Like, back in the 1940s, people would eat a mixture of everything. It was fairly high in carbohydrate, not as high as it is now, by the way. But it was a mixed diet. And so what they see is, if you eat that diet and you're deficient in this nutrient, if you don't get X amount of this nutrient, you're going to develop some sort of nutrient deficiency syndrome. And so they said, okay, well, we know that this level of nutrient deficiency causes disease, so therefore we're going to recommend this, everybody gets this amount, right? So what they found out back, even in 1897, there was a study where they were looking at animals, and they looked at something called thiamine. They didn't even know it was thiamine back then, but they saw that certain animals, if they were on a lower carb diet, they didn't get this disease, where animals on a high carbohydrate did get this disease, and the disease was called beriberi. And so that's a thiamine deficiency, which causes neurologic problems or congestive heart failure type problems. And so they were noticing that these animals are on a low carb diet, even though their thiamine levels were really, really low, they weren't getting diseases. So if you look at that and you look at all these other nutrients, things like manganese. Manganese is highly required for carbohydrate metabolism. And so if you're on a diet where you're not taking in any carbohydrate, all of a sudden you got to say, maybe I don't need as much manganese, and despite what the RDA says. And you can look at that after nutrient. Glucose and vitamin C is a huge one, right? So vitamin C, if you don't take vitamin C and you get really, you get scurvy, you get sick, you die. It'll kill you. You end up with bleeding in your joints, your teeth fall out, your gums rot, your skin opens up with sores, horrible disease. And these people are not getting scurvy. And so what's happening is we know that a molecule of glucose and a molecule of vitamin C are almost identical. And so they compete for the same transporters. And so if you don't have a lot of glucose floating around, you need way, way less vitamin C. And
really?
Yeah. So there's some, and this has been known for quite a while as well. So
that's fascinating, because obviously orange juice, tons of glucose, tons of vitamin C.
Yeah, right. They basically cancel each other out. And so I think what's happening, and this is one of the things I think potentially, and this needs to be investigated, but I think that a lot of people that we have all these vitamin deficiencies, vitamin D deficiency, magnesium deficiency, a lot of that may be caused by just ingesting too much carbohydrate and creating a higher than normal need. So basically, we're creating higher needs for vitamins.
Now, do you do blood work on yourself?
I haven't yet. I'm going to probably do it once I get, I'm a year at this.
You haven't done any?
No, I don't. Here's the deal, Joe. I've got a lot of people who do it all the time. I'm not that interested in it because I just don't. I don't think it makes that big of a difference for me. I'll do it just out of just to satisfy other people's curiosity. I don't really have that much curiosity personally.
About your blood work?
Not really,
I would think
really.
A radical change in your diet where you're just consuming only meat. I would want to see what kind of results I'm getting.
Well, it depends. If you can tell me what blood test tells me I'm healthy, and I don't think you can.
I think if you get a really good doctor who understands the difference between HDL cholesterol and LDL cholesterol and free testosterone available and all the different nutrients that are essential, and if you get someone who really understands that and can have a comprehensive examination of your blood work, I think you can benefit from it greatly. But also the knowledge that you can tell them, like, how do you feel? I feel great. Yeah. And they can get a look at this. What are you eating? And what kind of meat are you eating? Where are you getting in it?
Yeah, so that's an interesting point because we've started this, and again, I started doing this and got public on it on Twitter, and a lot of people were saying, well, yeah, you're doing well. I'm breaking some world records and stuff like that.
Yeah, but explain that. Like, what world records are you breaking?
So I've been an athlete my whole life, Joe. I've done.
You look like an athlete. You look pretty stout.
Well, I'm about 240 right now. But so when I was younger, I played rugby in New Zealand. I was playing with some of the All Blacks. At a high level. This is before it was professional.
That's the name of the team, by the way.
New Zealand.
So don't get weird.
No, it's not a race.
People are like, what, he's playing with blacks? Is that what he's saying?
No, New Zealand All Blacks. This is.
Yeah.
Do you want to know the history on that? That's kind of an interesting sort of thing. So back in the 1900s in New Zealand, guys were so fast, and there's forwards and backs. Forwards are like the linemen, and the backs are the fast guys. And they were all so super fit. And so they said they looked like they were all backs, but somebody made a typo. So they call them All Blacks. So that's where the name comes
interesting.
from. But they're like the best rugby players in the world. Some people say South Africa's pretty good, but New Zealand's pretty much the best. So I played down there with those guys, and then I went into powerlifting, and I had an American record in the deadlift. I was deadlifting close to 800 pounds as a drug-free athlete back in my 30s. And then I went on to, I did some strongman stuff for a few years. And then I went on to throwing, like track and field, like discus and shot put. And then the Highland Games where you run around with a big caber and wear a kilt. And I won the world championships in that. And then when I got in my mid-40s, I was about close to 300 pounds back then. I was about 280, 285. And I was like, man, I just can't keep doing this diet. So that's when I started dieting and stuff. And so I got down to pretty lean, about 240-ish, where I'm at now. And I started doing this indoor rowing stuff, which is on a concept too. So you remember, I know, Conor McGregor on his, you remember that machine he was rowing on?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of the MMA guys know that. So I got on there and I started training for that. And so what I did was, there's a 500-meter row, which is, and this is kind of interesting because it's highly, highly glycolytic. I mean, it's not like running a marathon like Zach Bitter.
Explain glycolytic.
So glycolytic means you're burning glucose. You're using muscle glycogen. I know you had, who's a fellow on a couple weeks ago?
Chris Kresher?
No, it was the other guy. It was Andy Galpin.
Okay, yeah.
And he was saying, no, you got to have glycogen. And I'm like, well, to do highly glycolytic activity. And so this is a highly, highly glycolytic activity. It takes about a minute to a minute 30, and that's intense. Like you're going all out, right? And so I was able to break the 50-plus world record in that. And it was when I got to 50, it was 1 minute 18.3 seconds, and so I put it down all the way down to 1:14. So I took 4 seconds off the world record without a single gram of carbohydrate. Totally.
But this is one of the issues with the ketogenic diet. If you eat too much protein, your body converts that protein back to glucose. That's one of the things that they were saying, that you have to have, you're supposed to have somewhere in the neighborhood of 70% fats, 30% proteins.
Right. So this is another sort of thing that I think a lot of people sort of have questions about. One of the things we know about gluconeogenesis, so that's converting protein or fat into glucose, is it's demand driven. So your body doesn't just make it. So if you eat a lot of protein, it doesn't just say, I'm just going to make a bunch of blood sugar for the heck of it, because your body doesn't need it. And so one of the things that glucose is extremely important to the body. I mean, we need it. I mean, it's absolutely. So the nice thing about it is if you regulate it really, really well, and the best way to regulate it really, really well is just to make your own. So rather than, getting it from kombucha or, eating a bunch of carbs, where it's going to be all over the place. So this is what happens. So ketosis, again, I probably spend, significant periods of time in ketosis, but I'm not always in ketosis, and that's not the point of this, But I think ketosis is probably a good thing, periodically. But I don't, like I said, I don't think, we can talk about evolutionary stuff.
But why would it, excuse me for interrupting you, but why would it vary if your diet's not varying? Why would you be in ketosis or out of ketosis if you're not varying your diet, if you're just eating only meat?
Right. So, because it depends how long I go between meals.
Oh, okay.
So if I'm not,
do you intermittent fast?
So I intermittent feast. So, this is what I think is, I think this is probably more. I will often go. Well, here's funny. So I was in Denver a couple nights ago. I went to the big Brazilian, get down, all you can eat meat place, and I just.
Churrascaria, yeah.
Yeah, I just picked
Fogo
out.
de chão.
So I went there and I had them come back 50 times.
Wow.
I clicked everyone. I had 50 friggin' orders of food. It was about 6 pounds of meat. I just put it away in one setting.
You ate 6 pounds of meat? That's insane, dude.
Yeah. So I put away about 6 pounds, and then I'm not hungry for 30 some hours. So I'm basically, it's not that I'm intentionally fasting, it's just I feasted so much that I just don't feel like eating. So here's what I think.
Huh.
Why do you think we have an appetite? I mean, what's the point of an appetite?
Tell you when to eat?
Right. And that's exactly right. But if you're eating the crappy wrong food, your appetite's all screwed up. So one of the problems we have is people eating the wrong food. We have all this processed garbage. It's full of calories, sugar and crap, but it doesn't have any nutrients in there. So every time you're hungry, your body's saying, give me more nutrition. Well, if all you do is pour in garbage, you're always going to be saying, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. So
plus the insulin spikes.
Yeah, all that stuff. I mean, so you want, insulin is not, we need some insulin.
Right.
I mean, we need insulin for muscle growth. It's a useful thing. The goal of insulin is not zero. That's what people need to understand. It's not, we don't want our glucose to be zero. We don't want our insulin to be zero. But we don't want it always, always, always spiking. And so, when you eat a big meal of something you're supposed to be eating, and I'll argue that I think meat's a pretty damn good meal, and we can talk about how it's complete or not. But so when you do that, you're just like, the next time you're hungry, it's time to eat.
Right.
I mean, your body said, I need energy, so you get it from fat when you eat meat, but I also need structure. And so by, eating meat, you're basically giving your body what it's asking for. And I think that works pretty well.
Whose phone is that? Mine?
No.
That's very interesting because most people would say you should eat a balanced diet, right? Most people would say that in order to be healthy, you should consume a certain amount of fruits, a certain amount of vegetables. You should have some whole grains. You should eat some meat. And if you come along and tell people, like, this is what I'm doing, I'm eating 6 pounds of meat and I don't eat for 30 hours, like, this guy's out of his fucking mind.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, it sounds crazy. In 2017, that's crazy. It's crap. I mean, I can point to thousands of people and doing it in excellent health, which is interesting. But I mean, balanced diet is just a friggin' cop-out. I mean, it's like, I don't know what the fuck to tell you, so I'm going to tell you to balanced diet.
But I wish you'd done some blood work so you should get us some data. I mean, it seems like with someone who's espousing this diet, like, it'd be nice you had some hard data.
Yeah, so I mean, because I didn't know I was going to do this. I just started doing it. I'm like, well, I've already done it. So I'll probably get some,
So but did you just decide, like, hey, I'm going to try this for a month and then just keep going?
I said, I'm going to try it for a month, and I just felt so good. I was like, well.
And you've been on it for?
So I started last December, so a year.
Wow. So a whole year of just eating meat. God, you got to do some blood work, man.
Well, I probably will. I mean, but the point is, the point I'm making is, well, what is it going to tell me? Here's the thing we don't know. One of the things is, I'll tell you what will probably, because I've seen hundreds and hundreds of people who've already done blood work, so I know what it's going to show, basically. So we've got this study going. We've got all these people submitting blood work. But probably my HDL will go up, my triglycerides will go down, my blood sugar will stabilize to a low level, my inflammatory markers will be normal. That's because I've seen lots and lots of other people's blood work already, so I know it's going to show. My cholesterol may be up or down, and that's something that we get a lot of people worried about that. And I can talk about cholesterol, in my view, is a pretty worthless marker, by itself. You have to take it into context, and so there's a couple people that are really, really intelligent about cholesterol that are really testing this sort of stuff. One guy's name is Dave Feldman. On Twitter, his name is Dave Keto. There's another guy named Ivor Cummins, who's an Australian. They're both engineers. And so this is what happened to this guy, Dave. He goes on a ketogenic diet, and his cholesterol goes sky friggin' high. It's like 400, way, way up there. And his doctor's freaking out, and he's freaking out. So he's like, I don't understand this. I mean, I feel great. Everything about me is just best health I've ever felt in my life. So what he does is he starts drawing his blood every single day. He gets a blood test. And what he finds out is that his blood cholesterol is all over the place. One day it's 300, the next day it's 200. One day it's 350, the next day. So when we go to the doctor every 6 months or a year and they get a blood cholesterol, you assume, well, that's my cholesterol, and it's always that way. Well, he found out that it's so variable. They've actually known about this since the 1950s, but no one has been talking about it. So what he figured out, and he's a systems engineer, and these engineers are some smart guys. I mean, that's one thing I kind of talk about. It's just because somebody's an MD or PhD doesn't mean they know everything. There's a lot of people that are plumbers and whatever. They don't have any formal training that can figure. They're smart people, and they can figure this stuff out. So he's an engineer, a real smart guy. And so what he does is he figures out that cholesterol is basically all it is it's traveling around in your blood based on energy flux. So if you've eaten a lot, so if you've eaten a whole bunch of food and you're full, your liver is saying, I don't need to put out a bunch of fat, because we burn fat as fuel, well, even if we're not on a ketogenic diet. So what it does is it transports fat. So when you're hungry and you haven't eaten it for a while, like you fasted for a blood test, your liver says, we need fat in the system because we're low on energy. And so it shoots out all this fat. And what happens is cholesterol is just cruising around for a ride. So it's just sitting there, as a passenger. So depending on how much you've eaten, when you've eaten, that'll change your cholesterol. And so it's not a very good marker. I mean, you can find studies that show for all-cause mortality, like if you're like you and me, because you're the same age as I am, I think you're right.
50?
Yeah, we're both 50.
Yeah.
So if we look at, and again, associational studies are not that great, but if you look at that and you say all-cause mortality, am I going to die or not? If your cholesterol is high, you're less likely to die. If your cholesterol is high, you're less likely to get Parkinson's disease. If your cholesterol is high, you're less likely to get a bunch of cancers. So it's like.
So you're saying that though, but most people hear this and they go, but if your cholesterol is high, you're going to get a heart attack.
Well, here's the deal.
You're going to die.
Yeah, here's the deal with heart attacks. And this is interesting because vegetarians and vegans. I don't mean to pick on vegetarians and vegans because I know some great ones. They're great people, and I think there shouldn't be a war between this. But vegetarians and vegans, the number one killer of a vegetarian and vegan is heart disease. I mean, that's what kills them too. It kills everybody. So it's just like do you trade? Am I going to die of cancer? Or am I going to die of heart disease? Which one? Pick your poison.
Well, most people don't understand that the sugar industry's hijacking of science in the 1950s, the way they paid off those scientists to literally false advertise the idea that sugar is safe for you, but that saturated fat and cholesterol is what's causing all of these issues with people and heart attacks. To this day, people just sort of repeat that, like they think it's gospel.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's part of the framework of society now. I mean, it's like,
what was the push that got you to say, I'm just going to eat nothing but meat? Was there anybody that you knew that was doing it really well that you were talking to? Did you get some? Well,
like I said, it was just reading about people online. I'll tell you what, if there's a guy named Joe Anderson on Twitter, and his handle is Joe Charlene 8898 or 9888. So this guy, it's just a guy, he's been doing it for 20 years. I'm just like, this is pretty cool. And like I said, reading back on that stuff. And then just because I've been an athlete, I'm like, and I've never taken drugs and stuff like that. And I was always like, what can get me to the next level as far as athletic competition? Because I'm just a really competitive guy. I mean, I just like to, push myself and see what works.
I know a lot of savage people that eat mostly meat. My friend Cam Haynes eats almost all meat.
Yeah.
He occasionally eats like something else, but most of what he eats is meat. My friend Jocko Willink, when he's tired, he goes, I need more steak. That's what he does. He eats meat.
I mean, it's a friggin' health food. It totally is. I mean, and there's a guy named Bobby Maximus who's a fitness guy. I guess he used to be an MMA guy years ago or something like that. But I know he did this steak every day thing. And so if we look back into history, I mean, there's all kinds of accounts of people using meat as an athletic performance enhancer. Back in the original Greek Olympics, those guys knew that they ate a lot of meat to perform better. The beef eaters out of London, these guys were the guards for the kings. They gave them extra meat because they know they would fight better. The Mongols, they just decimated, all through Asia. They basically just ate their horses and their meat. That's what they did when they traveled with that, And so you've got all these historical examples of people performing better. The Inuit, they were known to have this incredible work capacity, and all they ate was seal meat and reindeer and stuff like that.
So what's a typical diet for you? Like, give me a normal day. You wake up in the morning. So what do you do?
Well, I'll tell you what today. So today, I mean, eating wise, generally either one meal or two meals, depending on what my workout training is going to be. So this morning, because I knew I was coming up here, I trained real early in the morning. Well, it's fast. I set a new record, by the way, in my personal record, just doing that. But I had a couple of New York strips. So I had about 2 pounds. So
you ate 2 pounds of meat.
Oh, that's a snack, man.
Is that your phone, man, that keeps
it beeping?
It might have your little thing on there.
Yeah, I think I'm probably getting notifications from
people are saying, hey, bro, see you on YouTube, bro.
Let me turn that sucker
It's amazing, man. You look just like you.
Yeah.
So you had 2 New York strips today?
Yeah. I mean, that's,
2 pounds of meat.
It took me a while to build up to this. Before, like a pound of meat would be, that'd be tough. Now I can put down 4 pounds at one time.
And people looking at you would go, well, he's super lean. Like, obviously, whatever you're eating, your body's processing it really well. I mean, you don't have what someone would think of as a steak eater gut. Like, you tell a guy eats 2 steaks a day, and like, oh, he must have a gut. But that's all the mashed potatoes and macaroni and cheese and bread.
I mean, it's the stuff you eat with it. I mean, I'm just, I put, like I said, on that Instagram page, I've got, me exercising, doing stuff, and, pictures.
That was something that you talked about outside the studio right before we came in, that the studies that have been done on people consuming meat, and I brought this up as well, that there's a lot of misconceptions about these studies because they're not very clear. When they say that people who eat meat 5 times a week are more likely to get cancer, what they're not telling you is what these people ate along with the meat. Are they eating cheeseburgers? Or are they eating grass-fed beef where it's grass-finished, grass-fed, high in essential fatty acids, healthy for you? Or are they eating some bullshit cheeseburger with a sugary drink? Like, what is the rest of their diet? Are they consuming a lot of refined carbohydrates? Are they consuming a lot of sugar? Are they drinking alcohol? Are they smoking cigarettes? All you're saying is they're eating meat 5 days a week. It's not specifying in any way their actual overall diet.
Yeah, they don't sort that very well out, and so they've got all these epidemiology studies. And basically, a meat eater is basically someone, and statistically, we know they're more likely to smoke, they're more likely to drink, they're more likely not to wear their seatbelt, they're more likely to be in accidents, they're more likely not to go to their doctor, they're more likely just not to care. So that's what a meat eater is.
Why is that?
Well, it's just because if I tell you, as I say, Joe, eating meat's bad for you, and you say, F you, I don't care about my health.
Right.
Right? So you just don't care. So this is it. So they can't separate that out. So they've got all these studies where they try to separate it out. Let's say, we'll kind of even up the smokers, but they never can take that I don't give a fuck.
Right.
thing out of it. And so you've got this stuff, and then all the studies are really, really low strength. So if we look at, and we can talk about this about meat being causing cancer, because there's some concern about that with colon cancer. But if we look at smoking, when they determined that smoking caused cancer, the epidemiology showed a 2,000% increase in the incidence of cancer in a lot of studies. When they compare that to meat and cancer, they found an 18% increase, which is nothing. I mean, it's like it doesn't even matter. It's so
18% isn't high?
Not when you look at relative risk, right? So if your risk of getting colon cancer is 1, or say your risk of getting colon cancer is 5 in a million, right? And now it's 6 in a million. I mean, it's like nothing. I mean, it's like it's so minor. But if your risk is going from 5 in a million to 300 in a million, then you're like, well, that's pretty powerful.
Right.
So this is a problem. So it depends on the incidence. So if it's really low to begin with and you only raise it by a tiny amount, it's so small. And so what we know, there was a guy named Bradford Hill who talked about statistical correlations on when these things actually matter. And not till you get to 200% or 300% does it even matter. You can't draw any conclusion from that. The problem is
200, 300% difference out of like 1,000.
Yeah, right.
So like instead of 2, it would be 6. Yeah, something along those lines.
So instead
2
of
people out of 1,000.
Right. So instead of being 18% more likely, you're 200% more likely.
Right. Those numbers are confusing to people, though. The way you say like 200%, like what? That's a lot of people.
Right. So you would have to double or triple your risk.
Okay.
So 18% is not double or tripling. That's only putting it up by a fraction. Right.
Right.
So when you separate all that stuff out, and then there was the World Health Organization 2 years ago, declared that red meat was a class 2 carcinogen and processed meats was a class 1 carcinogen. They said it's like plutonium and smoking, and everybody runs all over the place with that.
Well, why'd they do that?
So here's why they do that. So first of all, and you can go on their website, and, they'll tell you what their conclusions were. So this was done by an organization called the International Association for Research on Cancer. They're based out of Lyon, France, and they are that's what the World Health Organization uses to determine their stuff. And so and this is, besides the point, but right now the IRSC is under investigation by U.S. Congress for using crappy science and, promoting a political agenda. So I don't know if that's true or not. Part of that's generated by probably big corporations who don't like their findings. But so they're under investigation for that. But what they say is we have some weak epidemiology, which is this 18% stuff, but we think we have some strong mechanistic reasons for this, right? So if everybody, there's a doctor named George Ede, E-D-E, who's a psychiatrist out in Maryland who's got this just tremendous, she analyzed the whole thing. She has a website called diagnosisdiet.com. So she did an analysis of all the 800 studies they used, and she found that what they ended up doing is most of them showed that meat didn't cause cancer. There was a small percentage that did. And they looked at all these rat studies, and there was about 25 rat studies, and they found like 3 or 4 of them showed that meat, if we gave this type of cancer, if we gave this rat a certain, amount of meat, and we genetically bred them, and we gave them a medicine that makes them get cancer, that they get a little bit of change in their colon that might turn into cancer.
What medicine makes them get cancer?
Oh, I don't remember. There's something. There's a special way to make rats get cancer. So they have this model that it makes them get cancer really, really easy. So what they did is they felt.
Why would they do that if they're trying to find out if something gives something cancer?
Well, because they want to make it. They want to be able to, they want to differentiate that as quick as possible. Because they got to use 1 million rats and.
I get it. I see what you're saying.
So this is a real fast way to show if they get cancer. But the problem with that, and she explains it very well, is that we don't know that they would get cancer. It's not shown. And the other thing, and we talked about this before, is that if you want to look at rat studies, and it's not to say that plants give you cancer, but there are pesticides in plants that have been studied in rats that we eat every day, natural foods and vegetables and fruits, that also give rats cancer. And so the only difference is we've got some really
by pesticides you mean things that natural compounds that plants extract or that plants secrete in order to discourage predation.
Exactly.
So these natural substances, when they feed them to rats and they isolate them and feed them to rats, it gives the rats cancer.
Of 52, they tested 27 of them showed
and these
cancer.
are just normal foods that we eat on a daily basis.
Normal stuff we eat on a daily basis. And so it's not to scare people out of eating that stuff, but it's just saying that's how much BS this stuff is based upon.
But it just seems to me to be so crazy that they're doing a cancer study, and they give the rats something that induces cancer in order to find out what gives them cancer more. So they give them this compound, and then on top of the compound, then they check their diet.
Right.
That
Well,
seems
and
so
and they also feed them sugar with it. So it's kind of like, it's just the way they do it. And so you can extrapolate. Does that really matter to humans or not?
It's just so hard to tell. I mean, there's so many things that animals can eat that we can't. It's just, the whole thing is bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, we're not rats. That's interesting. It's like the same thing when we talked about, cancer rates in the historical populations. With Messiah, they didn't have much cancer. Not until we started feeding them, the 1940s, 30s, and stuff like that. Not until we started feeding them all our crap that they started to get those diseases. So.
Yeah, it's all very strange, right? When you think about diet and health, you also have to take into account geographical. The geography that your ancestors evolved in, and what were they accustomed to eating. Like, there's different adaptations for the Inuit, for example, adaptations to cold. They probably have requirements for a certain amount of dietary fat.
Yeah, I think it's, this is what I think is interesting. I think we're all, this is one of the things that people talk about. There's like, everybody's so different. We have all this different genetics. We all need special diets. I tend to say that, that in certain circumstances that makes sense, but I think, evolutionary, we sort of split from primates. We shared a common ancestor with primates, chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, somewhere 8 to 10 million years ago. We don't know for sure. It's back and then. And so what happens is, the pre-humans kind of went one way, and then the apes and chimpanzees went up this way and went up into the trees. And if you look at even the difference between a chimp and an ape, a gorilla. A gorilla crushes all these all really fibrous food, lots of fiber and stuff like that. Chimpanzees can't tolerate that as well because their colon got a little smaller. Well, a human's colon's got way, way smaller, right? And so what happened is why you and I can throw a rock really far, and a chimpanzee, a chimpanzee can throw, if you give a chimpanzee a baseball, they can throw it about 20 miles an hour. It's not very strong. You and I can throw a baseball, 60 miles an hour average guy. If you get, Major League Baseball players are throwing at 95 plus, right? The reason we evolved to do that is because we were throwing shit at animals. We were hunting, right? That's what drove. I mean, our scapula is rotated. If you look at a chimpanzee scapula, it's on the side. It allows them to climb trees and do this stuff. And so these strong climate-based evolutionary pressures, which drove us to saying, there's all this ice age stuff going on. The climate's drying out. The fruits and the jungles are going away. Now it's all this grassland. And, there's not much to eat in the grassland, except for some animals. People eat some bugs and stuff like that for a while. And that's what, chimpanzees do. Even chimpanzees, 3% of their diet, now there's a lot of people say we're frugivores and all we should eat is fruit. But even chimpanzees eat about 3% of their diet comes from killing other animals. I mean, there's this red colobus monkey somewhere in Uganda or somewhere in Africa. The chimpanzees are hunting this thing to extinction.
Yeah.
I mean, they're good little hunters, but...
there's a David Attenborough documentary on it. It's terrifying. You see how organized they are to kill monkeys. Yeah. They have chimps at one end of this tree line, and they're coming this way, and they have chimps on the side, and they chase them in, and then they corner them. They ambush them. They get them in the center, and they just swarm them. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, and, think about it. Their brain is not even half as big as ours. I mean, so when humans sort of, and I think it's pretty clear that what drove a lot of our evolution, our ability to communicate, to strategize, some of the anatomic things was based around hunting. I mean, hunting, I know you're a big hunter, Joe, and I know it's not an easy thing to do. You've got to think a lot. You've got to be pretty smart to outsmart these animals, and especially when you're in big groups. And back then when they've got, they got it spears, basically. You look at, there was a population in Central Europe called the Gravettians, right? So if you look at population markers for nutrition, right? One of the things they look at is population height. So if there's a real tall population, it means that they had really good nutrition. And so if you look at the tallest people that probably ever lived were these Gravettians. These guys were just decimating mammoths. I mean, they were so efficient at killing mammoths. And so that's probably basically all they ate, for the most part. They might have a little bit of vegetables, but their average height was like 6'2", and this is like 30,000 years ago. That's crazy. So these people must have been giants. They were giants. And so the people that have sort of genetically are related to those people now are the people from Croatia and the Netherlands, which are, again, the tallest people in the world. The only other group that rivaled that are the Nilotic Africans, which are like the Watusi and the Maasai, which are all about 6 feet tall on average. And their diet is primarily, as we know,
livestock based. And then the other tall population historically were the Plains Indians, particularly the Cheyenne Indians, and they just lived on mostly buffalo. So it's kind of interesting as far as what's the best food for nutrition, and that's what I'm finding from a performance standpoint. It's just what makes me feel the best and work the best.
Do you supplement? Do you take vitamins or minerals or anything?
I don't. I just, I kind of, just, I won't say I take some salt. I'll salt my meat. I'll have some Himalayan salt or some regular salt.
How do you normally cook? You cook for yourself most of the time?
Yeah, man, you get pretty good at cooking steaks, Joe.
Yeah.
So I'll either reverse sear. I don't how to reverse sear. You get reverse sear a steak and a cast
So you
iron
cook
pan.
it slowly at a low heat to about internal
medium.
temperature.
Yeah, I do. I just like about medium rare, and then I throw it in the pan for a couple minutes and sear it up, and then eat it. Or I'll just throw it on the grill. It depends where I'm at. If I'm California, I got a grill here, so I'll throw it on the grill. If I'm back, in New Mexico, I'll do it because I don't have a grill there. So I do that. But that takes a couple minutes to
So you must do a lot of supermarket runs. Does that get expensive? It's got to be an expensive diet.
Yeah, so I mean, it's it depends. It depends on again how much. I'm probably eating more than the average person that does this diet that I'm aware of. Generally goes about 2 pounds of meat, and so they can do
A day,
right? And so a lot of people, people that are don't have the budget, they'll just do like ground beef and stuff like that. And you can eat 2 pounds of ground beef for under $10 a day, which is way that's 2 cups of Starbucks, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's actually not that bad for a lot of people.
Now, there's also people that have ethical concerns about the consumption of animals, especially the consumption of factory farmed animals on a mass basis. I mean, you're probably responsible for a whole goddamn field of dead cows.
Yeah. So I think I have a concern. I think people that eat meat should be concerned about it, and we're the ones that primarily need to make sure that's not happening. And so I think, as I would argue that, since evolution began, humans have been eating meat, and that's just what happens in nature. If you look at how an animal's killed in the wild, if a lion takes down a zebra, it's not a pleasant experience for that animal. And so most of the way that humans kill these animals now, from a humane standpoint, is pretty darn humane. I mean, even as a hunter, if you hit an animal and you don't get him, you don't hit him in the right spot, you got to track him down. It may take an hour or longer. So
the issue is not necessarily even just the eventual death of the animal. It's also the life of the animal before it was killed.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And so I think that, you have to look at, if the animals, like if you got chickens in cages and they can't turn around, right? And they're just cramped in there, that's awful. That shouldn't be allowed. One of the reasons they put chicken in cages is because they'll peck the hell out of each other. If they don't separate them, they'll just tear each other up. So that, there's different considerations on that. If you have an animal that you're, because I talk to a lot of cattle ranchers, and most of them, they really care about their animals. They're out in the snow and the rain, making sure their animals are fed, making sure they're sheltered. If an animal goes down, they're taking care of that. So, there's probably some bad apples out there, and if we know about that stuff, and some vegan documentary guy wants to make a film about that, then those guys should be saying, hey, don't mistreat your animals. Don't, intentionally hurt them. Don't have them standing in a pile of crap. Give them some, fresh air and some ability to move. But, if you look at cows or animals in the wild, they're herd animals anyway. So they hang out together anyway. It's not like if they're indoors. Now, if they're indoors and they've got, room to move around and they go in and go out, I don't think that's a big issue. And so I think you have to kind of, you can't just make it all black and white. There's some people that are good at it. There's some people that are bad. The bad ones need to be made not to do that anymore. But I mean, it doesn't change the fact that we all need to eat.
There's a company called ButcherBox that'll sell you grass-fed, grass-finished beef too. They send it to you. They're one of the sponsors of the show, and I've eaten their meat. It's very good. And if you're in a place, don't we have isn't there like some sort of a password or something that we give them? Let's see if we can find that. But there's ways to get. I mean, you have to search for it though. It's not.
I've seen
most of the
guys,
meat that you get, you don't really exactly know how the person is raising it. It's hard. I mean, if you can go, unless you go to some sort of a farmer's market or something like that. Oh, okay. You can get $10 off plus free bacon by using the code word Rogan at butcherbox.com.
Nice.
So ButcherBox is one option. There's, I'm sure there's, like I said, farmers markets are great too. You can actually meet the ranchers and, get a sense of how they raise these animals. But I think for health-wise, it's really critical to get grass-fed, grass-raised to get the best Do you pay attention to that, or do you just take whatever you can get?
Yeah, so I think you're right in the fact that if you say what is the most nutrient dense, what is the best quality I can get, grass-fed, grass-finished is going to fill that bill. Now, if you compare that to something that was, fed corn, right, and given hormones and given antibiotics, and what else do they do? Yeah, so you've got those things, and it's fed, grain. The difference nutritionally compared to, because if you don't have any money and you can't afford this stuff, compared to the rest of the crap in the supermarket, is so I'll use a MMA analogy for you. So if grass-fed, grain-fed beef is Conor McGregor or GSP, right? Then this other stuff is, say, some guy who's like the number 3 contender or something like that.
Really? Is that close?
The difference is, because you look at hormones in beef, so you don't want to eat hormones in your meat, right?
Right. You don't want antibiotics in your meat either, right?
Yeah. So you're in your grass-fed, even the elk you kill, you've got hormones in that stuff because the animal makes it naturally.
Of course.
So you're getting
natural hormones.
You're getting a very low level, and so what they do is they give those animals generally the same hormones. It increases the percentage a little bit more compared to what you and I make normally. So if we look at like nanograms, and I can't remember the numbers exactly, but the scale is what's important. So if grass-fed beef gives you 5 nanograms of estrogen, okay, grain-fed beef gives you 10 nanograms of estrogen, and then you compare it to eggs, which give you maybe 90, and you compare it to dairy, which gives you 110, and then you compare it to if you look at phytoestrogens, that's in the millions, right? So things like soybeans and stuff like that. And then you compare it to what does your body naturally make, and that's like 30 or 40,000. And so it's a really small level. So I think if you can afford grass-fed and grain-fed, I'm not saying how can you solve the world's problem, but I think if we just isolate for health only, say you're a poor guy and all you can afford is I can't afford this grass-fed meat. I can't afford $20 a pound for this stuff, right?
Right.
And Butcher Box is still too expensive for me. Then that's probably still a better option than going back and eating, the other crap, the Cheetos and all this other stuff. And even though like the organic fruits and stuff like that, it's just expensive for people. So I think it's like I said, it depends on who your audience is. If you've got unlimited resources, and most people don't, then you have to say, well, what's from a health standpoint, what is most affordable and what's practical? How do I get my health back? Because this is, I'm not like saying this is the best diet in the world for everybody. I'm just saying you need to find out what works for you.
Right, but basically what you're saying is that grass-fed beef is better, but it's only slightly better for you.
Right. In the grand scheme of things, right?
Yeah.
So if you're saying I want to be as good as I possibly can be, then I say probably grass-fed, grain-fed, and grass-fed is probably better. If you're like saying I'm just sick and I don't want to be sick anymore, then I'd say get what you can afford. Okay?
So you really think that meat is in some ways a panacea for health? You think that it really, if you just eat more meat, that your body will be more vibrant, more healthy? Like what is it about meat specifically?
Well, I think it's, so this is another sort of misconception. So I think a lot of people, it's extremely well absorbed in our body. Look at the end result of what do we do when we're eating, okay? What's the end result? We eat for 2 reasons. We eat to get energy and to build animal tissue. You and I are animals. We're animal tissue. The most efficient way to do that is just to eat some because your body has everything in the proportions that we need it, right?
Right.
And it's it's a misconception. When you hear a lot of people will say, if you eat a bunch of meat, it's going to sit there and rot in your intestines and it's going to putrefy and stuff like that. So they've done studies on people that have had ileostomies, and these are people that have had their colon removed, right? So you've had colon cancer or, inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's disease, where they take out your whole colon, and now you've got a little bag, which you poop into, this little bag, right?
Yeah.
So they've looked at people, and they've looked at what comes out when they eat meat. Almost nothing comes out. There's a little bit of liquid, right? So that means all that meat is being absorbed, but when you eat a bunch of fiber and vegetables and plants, all that stuff goes up in the bag because you can't digest it. You have to have bacteria in your colon that do that, and humans are not really good at it compared to other primates. We're really bad at it.
What about probiotics?
So I think probiotics, the microbiome is fascinating. There's a lot of research going on. There's a lot of people just talking all about this stuff, how it affects your health. One of the things that we try to say is, how do we define a healthy microbiome? You can't yet. We just don't know enough. There are we don't even know everything about the human body. And then to put in tens of billions of different bacteria, all different species, and say, this is a perfect combination, or that's a perfect combination. We're so far away from knowing that. We're in the very infancy of what that means. So what I would say is, if you're healthy, if your joints don't hurt, if everything's going good, then probably by definition your microbiome is fine. If you're eating just a meat-based diet, your microbiome is going to be different, and the probiotics are probably not going to make a difference for you. But if you're eating a crappy diet, and you're feeding your gut a bunch of sugar, you're going to get this dysbiosis, which is bad bacteria, and then maybe the probiotics might help in that situation. I'm not convinced. I just don't think there's enough evidence to show that that's a big deal.
That's interesting. So you think that perhaps maybe the probiotics exist, or maybe the probiotics are healthy? What's the matter? Freaking out? Well, audio levels? Yeah.
Too loud? Not loud enough?
No, not loud enough.
I was talking over it.
So the probiotics, you think, may be only beneficial if people are consuming a lot of variable things, or a varied diet, like carbohydrates, all sorts of different things, and then maybe the probiotics are necessary to sort of balance you out. Is that what you're thinking?
I mean, that potentially could be the case.
So you think that the microbiome of someone who eats meat is probably designed to eat meat?
Well, it is. I mean, your microbiome reacts to whatever you do. How much sleep you get, how much exercise you do, how much you eat, how much stress is in your life.
Right.
It's very, very adaptable. It can change in a day.
Right.
So whatever you're feeding it chronically is going to change what bacteria live there. So, it's like this thing about, again, back to this meat putrefaction thing. So if we look at the definition of putrefaction, it sounds awful, right? It's putrefying, right? Putrefaction is the activity of bacteria on protein, right? So if protein gets in your colon, it'll putrefy, right? So again, when we go back to these ileostomy patients, they studied people that were getting soy protein and meat. And guess which one had more protein going into the colon? Soy protein.
Yeah.
So eating a bunch of soybean stuff means more proteins going into your colon, and you're going to get more putrefaction that way.
Is that rumor, like, I know very little about what soy is supposed to do to you in terms of, like, raising your estrogen levels. Is that supposed to be a real thing?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people think so. I mean, there's some studies that support that. I don't know for sure. I mean, I don't think soy is a particularly good food for us. I know some people will say that fermented soy, is a little better.
Yeah, I've heard that's good for you, actually, right? What is that called?
Natto, yeah. I think it's an Asian type thing. But,
yeah.
I think that, there's certainly some people that I think there's a lot of associations with guys getting gynecomastia and stuff like that from eating too much soy.
Have guys really done that? I feel like that's one of those things where people just tell you, hey, man, you're going to get bitch tits.
I've got no idea.
I've never heard of guys getting that from anything other than steroids.
Yeah, I mean, there supposedly are. I don't know for sure. I can't say for sure.
Okay. Yeah. So now that you've been doing this, do you plan on, you've done it for a year now, do you plan on continuing this for life? Is this your diet now? Are you going to mix it up a little?
Right. So I'm going to, I seriously doubt I will not eat a ton of meat. I just think I feel too good. I mean, I think I want to feel good and perform as good as I can for as long as I can. So whether I say, and this is what I tell people, do it for a couple months, because this is one of the problems. So many people have health problems, and I think a lot of it's food related, and it's really hard to sort that out. If you're eating 100 different types of food, well, which one is it? I don't know. I'm gonna drop this out, right?
Right.
So
and it's obviously variable in terms of like your own individual biology.
Right. So, but I mean, when you drop down to just meat, then it's pretty easy. You just say, okay, I'm only eating meat now. If I add fruit back in, does that F me up or not?
Mm-hmm.
If it does, then I'm like, man, I shouldn't probably eat that.
Right.
If I eat dairy back in, so probably there'll be a point when I'll say, hey, I'm gonna, maybe once in a while I have have some berries again, and then just see how I do with that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. There are a lot of people, I'll tell you, that especially these guys have been doing it for 5, 8, 10, 15 years. I mean, they're like, man, that stuff screws me up, and I don't want to do that.
Who was the guy that you were saying? Did you find that gentleman online, young Jamie? Did you get the tab?
I had a few people up, but I pulled them off. Which one?
The guy that he was saying.
Joe Anderson.
I couldn't find him. It was.
If you go on my Instagram, there's about a month or two ago, I've got a picture. I put up 4 of these people. These are all people that have done it for a total of 55 years.
Oh, okay.
And there's one guy who's a marathon runner, and then these other 2 couple that have been doing it for 20 years. There's another gal. Her name's Kelly Hogan. That she was like big morbidly obese woman. and she went on a carnivore diet. She's done it for 8 years, and she got super lean. She was totally infertile, couldn't have kids, right? Super lean, carnivore diet, 3 kids later, happy as can be. All she does is eats hamburgers every day. I mean, that's her diet. I mean, it's the stories I get, this is because now I'm this kind of central point, and I get all these crazy, crazy stories of people
just from talking about it online.
Just from talking, yeah, it's kind of
how
like,
fascinating is that?
Well, it's kind of like a little movement, I think, and I think what you'll see over the next year or two, there's going to be a lot more people doing this just to try it, And I think it's a crazy. Some people are going to do it just to say, hey, it's cool. I'm going to be a carnivore. I'm going to screw around. But I think there's people that honestly are doing it, and they're really seriously improving their health. And I think whatever works is what you should do.
Well, I think that the removal of refined carbohydrates almost helps everybody.
No, I agree, 100%.
If not the removal, the severe restriction. Just restrict most carb. I mean, I think a day a week, just have at it. Have a fucking slice of pizza. Who gives a shit? Go to town. I don't think there's anything wrong with a cheat day. But I think overall, refined carbohydrates just do not seem to be a healthy nor normal thing for your body to consume.
Well, if we look at, historically, I mean, we didn't start consuming dairy till about 12,000 years ago. We didn't start farming till about the same time. So those things are relatively novel. We didn't start eating all this processed stuff till about 100, Crisco came out in 1910 or something like that. So all that crap we've invented in the last century, and then when high fructose corn syrup came in the 70s, all that stuff our human body just hasn't evolved for yet. So I think we're getting seriously messed up by that stuff.
Yeah, and if you look at the change in our diet, there's a corresponding uptick in diabetes and all sorts of other obesity factors and health issues. Sugar and refined carbohydrates, those are the 2 big ones. The other debate is whether or not eating all this meat is healthy for you. And what about diverticulitis? Have you ever heard about people getting that? Because I know that's what Brock Lesnar got. And one of the things that they said that he got it from just eating mostly meat.
Yeah, this is interesting because there's actually a guy named Perry, Perry, did a study in 2014. He did colonoscopies, right? So he actually looked at people. He was one of the first ones to do this. And he looked at people on these diets, and he found that the people that ate the highest amount of fiber and had the most bowel movements had the most incidence of diverticulosis. So diverticulosis precedes diverticulitis. So a diverticula is just a little pouch that shoots out from your colon. So it's just like a little sac. So what happens is that eventually gets infected, and then you get diverticulitis. But the people that were developing diverticulosis, the most in his study, he did 2 or 3 like this, showed the ones that were eating a bunch of fiber. And there's also studies on...
So that fiber gets caught or something? Is
Yeah,
that
potentially.
What the idea is?
So the question is, one other thing people don't understand, because a lot of people, when they talk about ketogenic diets and they cut out their fiber, they're like, you're going to get all constipated, right? I mean, so basically I haven't had a bowel movement in a year. It's got, it's not true, obviously. But so what happens is you just don't make anything. I mean, all that meat, it goes right into your small intestines. It's absorbed, so next to nothing gets to your colon. And so
Really?
there's nothing. There's hardly anything.
So you take little tiny poops?
Exactly.
What if you're like one of those dudes that's backed up and you don't even realize it, and you got like 20 pounds of undigested? Isn't that always the funny?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like John Wayne and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But what happens is,
What was the story?
well, he died with a colon full of stuff. But they said
a
because
bowling ball
Well,
full
but I mean, who knows? It wasn't meat. Look at this, Joe. If you go to the bathroom and you eat a bunch of corn and you look down there, sometimes there's some corn floating around. When's the last time?
Sometimes, almost every time.
When's the last
right?
time you saw a piece of steak floating around in the
A
toilet?
bone.
A
Big
bone.
old T-bone.
Yeah, maybe if you're eating bones,
Right.
but I mean, meat just doesn't get there. I mean, it's
Right.
it's a total myth. And so when we talk about what causes constipation, it's probably a neurologic thing. It's probably a neuromuscular thing. So the colon's not contracting correctly. It may have to do with electrolyte deficiency.
It certainly varies depending on my diet. When I eat a lot of vegetables, man, it just comes flying out like.
Well, it's because you're just putting more in, right? So you're not constipated. You're just shoving more stuff through the tube.
Sort of, but it seems like it comes out quicker. Like when I drink, the craziest thing for sure for me is kale shakes. When I drink kale shakes, woo, hang on, Hannah.
Well, you're getting a bunch of liquid fiber that's getting into your colon a lot
Just
quicker.
cleans it all out. Makes
Well,
you feel good though.
Well, it may be. There's some people who do it, but there's no real prize for the most bowel. When you get to the end of your life, you're not going to get an award for having more bowel movements.
You don't?
You don't.
Shit.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Well, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm not aware of it.
Damn.
So, but that's
Lied to again. But most people think that, just in all seriousness, that consuming fiber is important for like bowel movements and overall intestinal health and all that stuff.
Yeah, there's no doubt the more fiber you eat, the more bowel movements you're going to have. But what happens is if you get constipated, and there's another study about this. They looked at people with chronic constipation. They were always constipated. The only thing that helped them was taking all fiber out of their diet.
Really?
Yeah, there's a study.
But that's crazy because that's what people like. What is that called? Mucistill? What is that stuff? What is that?
Metamucil.
Metamucil.
Yeah,
Yeah.
psyllium fiber.
Isn't that like? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
fiber.
yeah.
Right?
But what happens is, what you have is you've got a neuromuscular problem where the colon is not contracting the right way, and so you're blacked up, and then you just shove more fiber in there, and it just fills up more and more, and eventually maybe you might be able to force it all through, but that's not how that's it's a lot of people will say that. I will tell you, there's a lot of people that will tell me fiber just jacks up their intestines. I mean, they feel awful when they're taking a lot of fiber.
Huh. I have heard that before when people try fiber supplements that they have issues. Now, do you vary? Do you eat lamb occasionally or wild game or?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what's available. I mean, I'm pretty happy with beef, but I mean, when I was in France earlier this year and I had just a bunch of lamb, that's easier to get. Sometimes I'll have chicken. I haven't had game meat in a while. I haven't had any game meat since I've started this, but I've eaten elk before and deer and chilies and stews and stuff like that. So that's fine. But I mean,
but you don't necessarily eat a lot of chicken, huh? It's mostly red meat.
Yeah, I just find it, and there's a lot of people like me that do this. They just find chicken is not as satisfying. It's probably not as nutritious. It's just kind of like.
Yeah, it doesn't feel as satisfying when you're eating it.
Yeah, no, it's probably not. I think it's just harder.
Yeah, I'm always trying to figure out like what is that response that you get when you slice into a steak and it's juicy and delicious, and your whole body goes like, oh.
Well, I think that's I think that's a primitive thing that goes back 100,000 years. I mean, I think that's like the point of, all this hunting we did, and it's just what kind of satisfies us.
That's why I always try to explain to people that the difference between like domestic beef versus like a slice of like moose tenderloin, like the difference in the richness of the flavor and the darkness of the meat and the nutrition content of the food is so much higher that the is higher too. Like when you slice into it and you're like, oh my God, it just, your body's like that, more of that. There we go. That's what we're looking for.
I mean, I think it's a primal thing. I think it's just like, this is satisfaction. I mean, it really is.
Well, the vegan army has, they've got their troops pointed in your direction, right?
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean,
I've got a bunch of tweets about you, and one of the tweets was talking about your record as a doctor in New Mexico and stuff that you and I went back and forth about.
Sure.
So let's get that out and try to figure out what the issue was.
Sure. All right. So I was, like I said, I'll just go to my background a little bit. So I go to medical school. I go to degree in biology. Then I go to medical school. Then I drop out of medical school to play professional rugby. I had this kind of crazy career. Then I go into the military and I launch nuclear bombs for 5 years.
Nuclear bombs?
Yeah. I was a nuclear bomb launch officer for about 5 years.
Where do you still launch nuclear bombs?
Well, I mean, up in Wyoming and Nebraska and Colorado, and there's.
They actually detonate them?
No. That's where you shoot them from.
Right. So you didn't actually launch them, but you were working on them.
I was a guy that if we went to war, if Donald Trump says we want to nuke North Korea, I would have been the guy that goes boom, presses the button. Right.
Okay.
So I did that. So they do all this crazy psychological screening to make sure you're not some psychopath. So I'm this like straight, ethical guy that's just like a good just a good solid guy, the top secret clearance and all this stuff. So I do all this stuff. So then I go play rugby, and then I get tired of getting my head kicked in. I was playing. I remember my last match. I was playing against some Russian team. I'm laying on the ground, and they're just teeing off on my head, kicking me in the head. I got blood coming out of my ears, and I'm 30 years old. I'm like, F it, I'm going to go back to medical school. So I go back to medical school, but the military pays for it this time. And so then, I do my time and, go through school, get my training. I graduate right at the top of my class in medical school. Because to get in orthopedics, you gotta be like, it's one of these real competitive fields. So you got to be really at the top of the class to do that. So I do that stuff, do all my training, bust my ass, do really well, get all these awards and training. Then I get to the military, and then they send me to war, right? So they send me to Afghanistan. And this is, if it's okay, I'll tell you a little bit about this.
Yeah, please.
So I come out of training, not long out of training, and me and this other dude, his name's Tom Large. He's an excellent surgeon, just a great guy, great people. Me and him are the only two guys at the main center in Afghanistan. So you fly out there, it takes you about 3 days. You go to Bangor, Maine, and these old ladies give you lobster bisque on the way out. It's kind of cool. Then you fly into Turkey, and then we sat there for like 6 hours on a runway. Wouldn't let us move. They wouldn't let us off the plane. And then they fly us into Kyrgyzstan, which is, they used to be part of the Soviet Union. So we've got a U.S. base in what was usually Soviet Union. So we stay there for a while, and it's freezing cold. And then we get on this C-130, which is a military plane. You know, you're packed in there with the cargo, and you fly in Afghanistan. And they're shooting at you, so they turn off the lights, so they, you know, so hopefully they don't hit you. They're shooting at you as you come in. So we get in there, and then I get off the plane, and then they put you in this giant hall with like 300 guys on cots. First night, and then we go to the first day to go to work, right? And we're taking over from the Army, and I was in the Air Force at the time. So we're taking over from the Army. The first thing that rolls in is this poor. I mean, I remember this, man. It was like welcome to fucking war. There was a guy, a Canadian guy. He was a 23-year-old kid. His Special Forces guy, you know, full beard, because, you know, the Special Force guys would wear beards because it was so they could blend in, right? Both legs blown right off. I mean, looking like, holy shit, you know. So this is, you know, stuff that's got real. So every day, boom, 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 trauma, crazy trauma. We would get people blown up by bombs. I mean, their legs are being gone. I mean, the third day we got there, we had a kid. He was a 17-year-old kid. And this is an enemy. We were taking care of enemies too, right? He's setting up a roadside bomb to kill our guys, right? He's a 17-year-old kid from Pakistan. He blows himself up. Blows off both his legs above the knee, blows off one of his arms and most of his hands. So he's basically, I mean, he's got nothing left. So we're operating on this guy. We do all these operations to basically save the kid's life, even though he's an enemy, because as a physician, that's just your job.
Right.
So what happens to this guy is, so we fix him up. It takes us, you know, a month to get him stabilized, and they take him out the gate. The Afghan army just goes and shoots him in the head.
Really?
I mean, we're like, fuck. You know, we're like, what the hell are we doing here? You know, it's like we're doing all this work, and they just got and killed these people.
They did that because they knew who he was
Yeah,
and what he had done?
Yeah, they knew he was an enemy, and so, you know, they don't, you know.
They don't play games.
They don't play games. And so, and this happened the other way, too, around. We saw this.
That seems like a lot of wasted money.
It is. It's a waste. It's heartbreaking. You know, you get in there, and so I'm getting these people that are blown up by rockets, their whole legs
Do you get
blown.
attached to, I mean, it's like, even if it's the enemy, like you're in the military, you're working as a surgeon, you're overseas, you're taking care of, I mean, obviously it's a 17-year-old kid.
Right.
Like, it's almost like not even his fault.
This is the thing. I mean, a lot of it was the Taliban at the time, and these guys are like, you know, if you don't come fight for us, we're going to kill your family.
Right.
And so a lot of these little kids are out there doing this shit. They don't. That's
Yeah.
not what they want to do. It's not
Right.
like they're the big guys. So you kind of do. I mean, it's like, you know, it's like, hey, you know, it's not my job to punish these people. It's my job to take care of these people. So,
Were you there when they shot the kid? Or did you just hear
no,
about
we just
it?
heard about it. We're like, what happened to him? Well, they killed him. You know, we heard about several of our patients this happened to, so it was pretty frustrating. So we get in there, and there's like people like, I mean, little kids. We're getting these little kids, 2, 3-year-old kids, stepping on landmines, the legs blown off.
Jesus.
We had one little 3-year-old kid. I mean, somebody drug him behind a truck for like a mile. And they drug this kid through the streets, to the rough asphalt street, and his legs fucking ripped off. I mean, his kid's road rash. Actually, his legs were ripped off. He was burned everywhere, and we're in there treating this stuff.
Why did they do that to him?
I don't know, just mad at their parents. I don't know. It's just this is not a life-friendly place, right? Life is inconsequential there. There was a guy. We had a pediatrician who was talking to this guy who was a farmer, right? And he was telling us about his tractor, right? He was real proud he had a tractor because it's real expensive to have a tractor in there. So what he would do, because tractor's real valuable, he would have his kids walk in front of the tractor so they didn't hit any landmines.
Oh my God.
So if your kid he's like, I can make another kid. I can't afford it. So this is the mentality there. You know, it's just.
God. Oh my God. I can't even hear this.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy stuff. So we get in
Could
there.
you imagine? You have kids. Could you imagine telling your fucking kid to walk in front of landmines?
I couldn't do it. I mean, it would be awful.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So we get this stuff, and then it just keeps getting worse. I mean, it's like every day we get these people with, you know, they're blown up, and you're looking at their hip socket. You know, you're like a guy's laying there with his leg completely gone. You can see his spine, his hip socket. Day in and day out, we're seeing this stuff. We get, this one. So remember, Dick Cheney was a vice president, right?
Yeah.
So he flies into the base, right? And it was supposed to be secret. No one's supposed to know about it. But the Taliban guys found out about it, right? So what they do is they go to our gate, set off a suicide bomb, and they just kill, I mean, tons of people. And we get all these casualties. You know, most of them are civilians, right? So we get all these civilian casualties, little kids and adults. And, you know, in their suicide vests, they put all these, like these metal bearings, you know, like half-inch thick metal bearings, and they cover them up and cover them in shit so they get infected, and they blow through people. I mean, you get people with stuff going through their brains and shattered bones everywhere, and all these people that are just, you know, dying. So it's chaos. You know, all these people get swarmed in there. We were getting this stuff all the time. This was the biggest one we had. And so we literally 40 hours straight you're working. You know, you're trying to save people's lives. You know, I'm operating with the general surgeons on people's bellies, which I'm not trained to do, but I'm just helping. We're trying to do this stuff. So in the middle of this operation, we're in there operating, you know, trying to take care of these people. And you're in the operating room is just a little, I mean, it's like a little metal storage building. You know, it's like a little, like if you're moving, you know, those little pods things, you know. Mm-hmm. So they stick a couple operating beds in there, and we're going as fast, and we're wearing body armor, and we have 9mm strapped to us, and we're operating. You know, it's hard to move around. It's real small. And we're sitting in there, and they say, hey, guys, we think there's another bomber inside the hospital, you know, and the hospital may blow up. So you're sitting there going, you know, your butthole tightens up, and you're like, well, fuck, I got to keep operating, you know, because I'm trying to save this guy's life. So we just like, well, we're going to go, right? So we just keep, you know, we keep operating. Fortunately, they didn't find, because they thought somebody snuck in as a casualty. So they sometimes do that. They blow people up, and then they sneak in as a casualty and blow more people up. So that's
Jesus Christ.
So it's like, you know, it's kind of freaky. And so I was like,
what an insane environment.
Yeah,
how long were you there for?
6 months. Yeah. Yeah. So that's pretty crazy stuff. So, you know, we get out of there, and, you know, I mean, it was a tremendous experience. I mean, it was just like, because there was nothing I could see that after that, it was like, that ain't nothing. You know, everything I saw after that as a surgeon was like, this is no big deal, right?
Right.
So then I get out, and then I get out of the military. I do another 5 years just taking care of normal guys in the military, right? Doing, you know, taking care of troops and stuff like that. Doing fine. I worked for all these other hospitals and did fine. I never had any problems. And then I get to this other hospital, and I join this group, and they make me the head of the group, right?
What kind of group?
It's just like an orthopedic surgery group. So, and when I got there were like 2 guys, and they weren't doing hardly any business at all. It was like really slow. No one knew they were there. You know, they were in part of this big, huge group that had all these other doctors, but they didn't even know they existed. So I got there, and I said, well, this is crap. And one of the reasons, because no one was seeing anything, they would refuse all these patients. I got there, and I said, hey, man, I'm going to go talk to all these other doctors and let them know we're alive, that we're here, and that we're going to see anything you want to send us, and we'll take care of it. And if we can't, we'll make sure it gets taken care of the right way. So that happened, and then we started growing, right? So we went from 2 guys to 12 guys in about 3 years. And we were very, very busy, real busy group. And the rival group from out of town, from across the street, didn't really like it that much, because we were taking millions of dollars tens of millions of dollars in their business, right? Because orthopedic surgery is very, very lucrative for a hospital. You know, there's things like cardiology where they're putting in stents, and surgery. All these procedure-based practices make a lot of money for hospitals, so they really like it, right? So they're really happy. They're happy with me. I'm like the hero, right? Because they're like, man, you're making us a lot of money. The group across town doesn't like me very much because I'm taking all their money away. And so they approached us, and they said, you know, why don't you join our group? We'll take care of it. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. But 2 of my partners did. They eventually left. So I'm the only holdout guy. But I'm still going. I'm still building the group. And so I'm like the head of the snake, the rival, right? But here's what's kind of happened. So I'm busy. I'm doing well. My patients are happy. I'm doing really well. I've got real low complication rates. You know, everybody's, you know, I'm very popular. You know, I'm on billboards. I'm on magazines. I'm on radios. You know, I'm just their poster boy, basically, right? So then, as I found with my diet, I started seeing patients getting better by just changing their diet. And when you look in the orthopedics, you know, like bone disease, like arthritis, there's nothing about diet in there. I mean, you study about it. If somebody comes in your office, you know, you'll tell them, you know, we can give you some Tylenol, we can give you some, you know, another anti-inflammatory drug. We can stick some cortisone in your knee. You know, if that doesn't work, maybe we'll send you to physical therapy. We might put a scope in there. And if none of that works, you know, and this is an end stage, and we're going to replace your knee, right? So what I was finding, you know, as I started doing this with patients, is that these patients are getting better just by changing their diet, putting them on a ketogenic diet. At that time I was doing keto. So I was like, hey, man, try this. So my nurse, and I had this, and this is one of the things that kind of, I'm very jaded about the way the business side of medicine is now. This has been a pretty interesting experience for me. So I had a nurse that was just, I mean, she was a wonderful person. I mean, the nicest, sweetest gal in the world. She would work so hard for these patients. She would take care, you know, anything you needed done, you tell her, hey, take care. And she was just awesome, right? The hospital said, you're staying too late and we're having to pay you overtime. And she's like, well, I'm taking care of patients. Well, we don't care. I don't want you to work late because it costs us too much money. So it was just like, it was one of these things where you're starting to see that, you know, it's all about the money. And then we were like, so all these surgeons are, you know, as a surgeon, you get used to using certain equipment. You know, it's like, I'm using this particular thing to replace people's joints. And you do it for years and years and years, and you get pretty good at it. And so what the hospital said is, hey, we got a bargain deal with this other company, so your guys are going to use that. We're like, no, we don't want to use that. We learned how to do this. We don't even know how to use that stuff. So they force everybody to do this, just to save, whatever.
Some new surgical equipment, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, basically, there's a system. It's like if you drive a Ford truck your whole life,
Oh, I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
And then they say, no, you're going to drive a Chevy now.
Right, but this is surgical
This is surgical
equipment.
stuff. This is surgical. The whole reason is that we're going to save you money. And all the surgeons were bitching. The ones the guys were already using, like, I don't care. And this is the other group. We don't care. But our group was like, we don't use this stuff, man. It's stuff we don't even know how to use. It's gonna,
right, you're not adapted to it.
You're not adapting. You're going to compromise patient care a little bit for this. So, this is one of those things where I was very vocal against this. I was like, man, I don't, this is BS. This is what we're trained on. We're gonna end up, there's gonna be patients that are gonna be problematic from this stuff. So that was an aside thing. And then there was a system where, it's another thing they put in this is one thing that all physicians hate. This thing called an electronic medical record. It's a computer-based record. Not that it's a computer-based thing, but they're awful. I mean, they sit there, and their main function is to collect billing and to do coding. So it's to capture as much information as you can so you can bill more, right? That's why hospitals like them. So they put this on you, and it's like, it's like really hard to take, to put good information there, because all it is generate a bunch of data that's totally illegible. You look at it, it's like you get 20 pages of BS and two paragraphs of stuff you need, right?
So where did it all go bad?
So so basically what happened is when I started telling people, I don't want to, I started talking people out of surgery, right? I started saying, I don't think you need surgery. And then I started talking to the administrators and say, hey guys, I really want to spend a day a week just doing lifestyle counseling. I don't want to, constantly do this, because I think this can work really
constantly, you're making the cutting motion, like
constantly surgery. Right. And so they basically said, no, there's no appetite for that. Your skill as a surgeon, we want you there. In other words, keep making us a lot of money, right?
Right.
So I'm like, and my nurse will tell you, I was printing out, I made a list of all this reading. You remember, like Gary, I know you had Gary Thompson, I had his book, and I had Anita Teichholz's book on, and I had this guy named Butter Bob Riggs, all these ketogenic things, references, and I was handing them out 20, 25 of those every single day, and I was spending time with the patients, because normally you'd only get like eight minutes to see a patient, figure out the problem, figure out a plan, go. And I was like, now I'm spending 20 minutes talking to these guys about diet. And so, then I'm seeing less patients, and the hospital keeps saying, we don't really like that. So because I was ahead of the group, and I was well liked by everybody, I had really good patient records, really good patient satisfaction, really low complication rates. They were like, well, we don't like that. So then there's something called peer review, right? So they can just pull your records and say, we don't like the way you did this, and we're gonna criticize your work. And so they did that, and they went through there, and this is one of the things they said, well, every surgeon will have X amount of complications, right? It's like, if you do, 100 surgeries, about 5% of the time there's going to be some complication. Somebody's going to get an infection, somebody's going to bleed too much, somebody's going to get a blood clot. If as an orthopedic surgeon, maybe one of the screws you put in breaks or something like those things are all complications. That happens to everybody, no matter what. So what they said is there's a low threshold, right? There's like we're going to say every year we're going to give you 2 complications that were your fault, right? Because most of the time you have a complication. It's like, man, there's nothing I could have done
Equipment
differently.
failure. Things
Or they'll say you made the wrong decision, that led to a complication. So they'll say you can get 2 a year, right? And it doesn't matter if you do 100 surgeries a year or you do 500 surgeries a year. The number's still 2, right? And I'm like, because I was there for like 5 years, and like every year was like 1, just nothing, minimal, right? One year they go back and say, oh, you had 3 this year. I'm like, yeah, but I did 5 times as many surgeries as anybody else. And they said, well, it doesn't matter. We're gonna still put you through peer review. So what they do is they hire. Remember this other group that I was pissing off that I was taking $10 million a year from? They hire that guy, to look through my stuff.
Why would they do that?
Because that's what they wanted to do.
But why would they do that if that person on that other side is the competition?
Because he was in the position to do it, right?
Okay.
So, and that's not supposed to happen. It'd be like if you were a Bellator guy and said, I want the Bellator guy to review the UFC, right? I think Joe Rogan sucks as an announcer. I'm going to have a Bellator guy go after him, right? So it's total conflict of interest, right? So I'm like this naive, ethical guy that's like, well, I know I had good care and patients were doing fine. And then, you know, I was just like, okay, that's fine. And so they get it back, and they looked at a dozen cases which they've selected, you know, so they could pick whatever they want. And they said, well, he said, I think 6 of these cases were below average. You know, I don't like the way you documented stuff, and I disagree with what you did. So I'm like, fine. They said, well, that's okay, you know, you're fine. I said, well, do I need to stop operating or something like that? They said, no, you're fine. What we're going to do is we're going to get an independent review, right? And this is supposed to be somebody with no conflicts of interest, right? So the way this is supposed to happen is that they were supposed to let me see what the cases are and put my comments in there, right? And it's supposed to be totally independent. So what they did instead is they wouldn't let me know any of the cases. They told me, you can't see anything, right? And the guy that had the conflicts of interest, they gave him all of his findings and sent them to this guy, right? And this guy, and I don't know the situation for this guy, but you know, I found this out about 6 months later. He is either senile or totally drunk. I mean, it was just like, you know, so he gets this report, right? And it's just bad. It's like, looks really bad. And I'll talk about some of the details in a second, but it just looks really bad. And they pull me in the office and say, we got this really bad independent report, right? And I'm like, well, what cases? We can't tell you, but it's really bad, and we're gonna suspend your privileges. We're not gonna let you work here anymore.
So essentially what you're trying to say is they targeted you, and they targeted you because you were changing what you were doing, and you were trying to counsel people with lifestyle, and they decided to pick on you and try to find things that were wrong in some of the past surgeries that you'd done.
Well, I think there's a combination. I think there was a combination of problems where we're not. Some people weren't doing it intentionally, but there was definitely possibly some of that going on. But anyway, so they get this report. And the guy, there's 2 people. They bring me in the office and say, you know, we're going to shut down. You can't go to your clinic. You can't talk to anybody you work with. We're going to deny you access to all clinic charts. We're going to shut off your email. You can't look at anything, right? Like I just committed murder, like I'm some pariah. And then they say, then the guy, and I'm like, I mean, it's like my kid just died. I mean, this is something I spent my whole life training for. You know, I'm doing this stuff, and it's like, you know, I mean, it's like you're like dazed and confused and numb. I mean, I'm like numb. I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to drive my freaking car off a cliff. You know, you're like suicidal almost, you know. So the guy comes to me and he goes, hey, man, we got this really bad stuff on you. It's going to go really bad. We're going to take it to a committee in a couple of days. And I think the best thing you can do is just say you're sorry, write a letter. I'll even help you write this letter, you know, and basically say confess that you did the wrong thing. So I'm like, you know, I didn't have a lawyer at the time. I didn't know what's going on. So I said, okay, I'll do this. And so I write this letter saying, yeah, you know, I probably could have done stuff different. I don't know what the cases were, but probably. And so, you know.
So you're saying this without even have reviewed the cases that they're condemning you on?
Absolutely. Because
How the fuck did you not get a lawyer?
I did afterwards, but I didn't know because I know, you know, I'd been a straight-laced, ethical guy my whole life.
So when you did afterwards, did the lawyer go back and look at that confession or whatever you would call it and say, well, this is preposterous because you're not even talking about a specific case?
Well, she said it was probably something you shouldn't have done, and I wouldn't have counseled you. But this guy was on the committee that condemned me, right? So this is a guy that's on.
So they set you up.
So,
in some ways.
So this is
you don't want to say that because you still want him to be a doctor.
Well, so this is so basically they take this committee, right, and they hand this report that says all this bad stuff, and they hand my confession, right, and this is basically what they have to go on.
Mm-hmm.
No one knows anything about the cases, and this is all these people that are doctors, but they're not surgeons, right? All they are is it would be like if you were reviewing MMA guys. Like, say you want to kick somebody out of the UFC because you said his performance isn't up to snuff, and you went to a bunch of tennis players and golfers and said, hey, man, we don't think his takedown percentage sucks.
Right,
and,
I see what you're saying.
So these people have no friggin' clue, right?
Right.
They have no clue about what I do.
And they don't have specific cases to go on.
And they have no specific cases, and I'm not allowed to talk about this because I don't know the specific cases. So then
a railroad job.
So then I kind of come out of this haze, and I look and I said, we'll give you a fair hearing. So this is what they call it, a fair. Federal law requires us to give you a fair hearing, right? So I get a lawyer, and this is expensive as shit. You know, I don't have an income anymore, so I'm spending all this money on lawyers' fees, and and the hospital just drags out, and they won't release records for like 6 months. So 6 months goes by. I'm in here. I got 4 small kids. I'm like, fuck, am I going to feed my kid? My kids are in school. I got one autistic son that needs therapy, and you know, this is tough. You know, so I'm going through this stuff. So 6 months go later, and then I finally get the cases, right? And I start looking through the cases and what the guy wrote, and not only are there errors, there are egregious errors, and there's multiple of them, and they're just horrible. I mean, they're just so wrong. I mean, that's why I said the guy was senile or drunk. And I'll give you a couple examples, and any orthopedic surgeon that's listening to us will know immediately what I'm talking about, but I'll try to make it make sense for other people. So of these 12 cases, 2 of them were something called a reverse shoulder replacement. So what happens is, if your shoulder wears out, you can replace your shoulder, right?
You did shoulder replacements on people?
Yeah. A lot of.
What do you put in there, like some sort of an artificial joint?
Yeah, so this is what I'm talking about. So normally it's a ball and socket joint, right? So there's something called a reverse shoulder replacement, which you basically switch it around. You put the ball where the socket was and the socket where the ball was, which sounds totally crazy, right?
Right.
This was developed in France in the 80s, and then the FDA approved this in 2004. Right, so 2004 was approved in the U.S. And originally it was approved for one reason, right? If your shoulder is totally arthritic, real bad arthritis, and you don't have a rotator cuff anymore, and it's completely gone, right? So that's what it was first approved for. But over the years, over the next 5-10 years, people started using it for all these other things and getting really, really good results with it. So if you come in there with a blasted apart shoulder that's crashed and broke and you're an older person, people do that all the time. And so that's what I did. I basically put a reverse shoulder in a person that broke their arm. I did this twice. And not only did the patient do well, I mean, the patient was happy as can be. They're great. They're like, and no one knew what the outcomes of these patients were. This patient is happy as can be. But the guy writes, because he's old, I think, or drunk, or doesn't know the new record. He hasn't read literature in 10 years.
He writes, you put it in backwards.
No, he puts, it's not indicated for this. The only reason to do it is for an arthritic guy with a missing rotator cuff. But he doesn't know that over the last 10 years, all kinds of different reasons to use it. So he basically tells this committee, he's doing the wrong operation, when anybody today knows that that's not the case, right? So there's another case. There's a guy comes.
No, it's okay. We don't have to keep just going over case after case. It's going to get a little dragged out.
I know.
But where does it stand right now?
So basically what happens is, they dragged us out for a year and a half, right? And they finally, and at the end, I tell you, because I got to tell you this part. So I go through, this is important. I go through and compile all these cases, right, and get all the data to refute this and pull all these references and textbooks and all this stuff. And I'm like, this is a walk in the park, right? I'm going to, anybody that sees this in their right mind is going to see that they screwed up and there's all these errors and it's wrong. So in discovery process, you send all this information in, and then they realize that, wait a minute, there's a lot of errors in here. So now they have to pick a hearing officer, right, who's like the judge, right? His word goes. So they get another search. They give me a list of surgeons to choose from. They say, you can have any of these guys you want. And I looked through the list, and there's one guy, you remember that group that I was competing with? Mm-hmm. He's in that group. And I'm like, I don't want him because he's on the other group.
Right.
And they said, no, he just retired. And we're going to make you use him, right? So they pick the judge, and then on top of that, they pay him.
Oh, great.
So they're paying this guy, right? So they review all this stuff, and I've got this stuff, and I'm going through case after case where I'm like, the patient was doing great. They didn't get hurt. There's nothing wrong with them. And the lawyers from the other side are like, well, you can't do this no harm, no foul stuff. I'm like, what are you talking about? Everybody's doing great. But he's like, well, I think, you could have done something different or something like that. And if you look at a malpractice case, the first thing you have to do is prove harm.
Right.
If no one gets hurt, there's nothing there. And it's not that no one got hurt, no one did. But it's just like, so the guy at the end of it goes through and he says, yeah, there were a lot of errors, right? And they're paying this guy. And they chose him. But I think you gave patients too much choice in their care, I'm like, what are you talking about? So
So the criticism was that's all they had after the errors.
He said it was really bad errors.
Okay.
And they said you gave patients too much choice and you didn't document stuff as well as you should have, right? And I still think that they should have just suspended you. So this is the decision they make based on that. And I will guarantee if anybody was on that committee that knew me, because those people that knew me on the committee knew I was a good guy. They never had problems with me. So that's why they were shocked when this came out. But if they knew that information, I'm 100% convinced that would be a different.
So where does it stand?
So then, I get done with that, and then the state gets involved because the state has to respond to any complaints. So the state gets this complaint, state of New Mexico. And it's kind of weird because my next door neighbor's on the state board. And I'm just like totally avoiding the guy because I don't want to influence anything, right?
I'd be giving him flowers.
No, but I just didn't want to do that. And I even told him, I said, hey, my next door neighbor is on your board, right?
Okay.
So I want to be totally ethical about this. This is a story. So they said.
Actually, dudes don't like flowers.
Yeah, well, maybe give them an elk steak or something like that. So then, the board gets this, and they say, hey, man, this is a bad recommendation, and we're going to give you 2 options. You can suspend your license. You can voluntarily surrender your license, or you can go to trial. We can do another hearing, which is probably going to take a year. It's going to costs you tons of money, which I'm just tired of this. I'm tired of lawyers spending all this money, and I'm still trying to figure out how am I going to feed my kids. So then, the state says, or what you can do is we'll send you to a place that'll evaluate you independently, and then if everything goes well, we'll give you your license back. So I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do, because I'm tired of this. I don't want to spend $100,000 and wait a year when I can go to this place and spend $12,000 and get evaluated and go from there. So that's where I was this week. In fact, I was in Denver meeting with these other surgeons, and they were just like going through all these case. What would you do? What would you do? What would you do? And I am clearly, even though I haven't done this stuff in 2 years, I'm clearly convinced that they're going to say, hey, man, you're fine. And they're going to say, here, go operate with somebody for 2
Are they
3
allowed
months.
to look at those cases where you were judged upon poorly?
They're not. They're not because they want it to be totally independent.
Fucking insane. So how do you make a living now?
I'm living off my savings. I saved up some money, so I'm living off that, and that's mostly it. So I'm just kind of slowly watching my savings dwindle down.
Jesus Christ, that's got to be stressful.
It's kind of stressful. I mean, I've got a girlfriend who makes a good living, but I don't want to be, but I've got kids. So we've got kids. I've got a kid with her, and I've got 3 kids with my ex-wife, and they're all young kids. And so I'm back, and that's why I said I'm traveling back and forth.
Oh, man.
Back and forth, trying to support these kids. I had to pull my kids out of school. I had to put them in a different school because the income wasn't there anymore. And it's kind of a pain. It kind of sucks. But,
so where does it stand as far as like getting your license reinstated?
Yeah, so probably. So I was just in Denver. They said it'll take about 8 weeks. So they'll give me a plan. They'll say, okay, we think that and I am almost 100% convinced they're going to say, we need you to go work with some dude for a couple months because you're out of practice. Mm-hmm. And I think I'll probably end up doing that. Then the state board will review what they say, and as long as they say, hey man, you know what you're doing, they'll give it back to me. So
insane.
Yeah. So anyway, it's again, I don't blame the state board. I don't blame the people who are on the committee because they were clueless. I didn't know. What I blame some incompetence by the administrators, and just whoever reviewed me. If it were caveman times, Joe, I'd go with a big club and like, what the F?
No, I understand. Man, that's very disheartening. But I have a friend who's going through a very similar type situation. Who's also a surgeon.
Yeah.
I think people need to understand that the medical business is in fact a business. And we think of hospitals as being these completely, egalitarian places that just they exist to heal people and to do the best job. They sort of do, but they need to make a lot of money.
Well, they got to pay the light bills. I mean, I understand that, but then there's a point where it's kind of like you've got to make a decision between patient care and and the CEO making a little extra money.
No, they do that with animals too. I mean, you got to be really careful. I had a friend who had a recent situation happen with his dog where they were telling his dog needed to get some crazy surgery and he didn't have the money for it. And he's like, are you sure? Are you sure they need it? And he said, I had to ask them over and over and over again. And he said, and finally the veterinarian said, well, we could try a steroid on the dog and see if that works. Fucking fixed it 100%.
Yeah.
And the steroid cost like $150 versus some $30,000 surgery.
Yeah,
but they kept pushing this surgery, which would have fused the dog's discs.
Yeesh.
They were like, this needs to happen, you need to do this. And he's like, wait, it's just, there's no other options. We have exhausted all possible options. And then finally, after asking over and over and over again, she suggested meekly this, which instantly fixed it.
Yeah, it's kind of.
He said within like 2 months, the dog was 100%.
It's kind of because I know he had Chris Kresser on here a while ago, and I listened to a little bit of his stuff, and his premise at the beginning, which I haven't read his book yet, but I think it's great. I mean, here's a problem with Western medicine. We are facing this. I mean, it's like a war against chronic disease. It's like we're being invaded by. Remember Independence Day with that? And doctors. We got BB guns. I mean, the stuff we are shooting at them doesn't work for chronic disease. Now, acute stuff, it's different. There's some stuff that we have this wonderful technology, but the run-of-the-mill diabetes and obesity.
Doctors are great for fixing broken joints, broken bones.
Fine. Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But even like arthritis that I saw every day, if we were trained properly in nutrition and exercise, that's what I've done my whole life. I know what I'm doing exercise-wise. But, if we were allowed to do that, and instead of training all these radiology technicians and blood draw technicians and nursing assistants, if you had an army of preventive people, preventive medicine people, and we train all these people to go into people's homes, I think Kresser was talking about that, and just get the crap out of their diet and show them how to be healthier. I mean, you would save, you know, it's funny watching the politicians debate about healthcare, how to fund it. You know, it's like you guys are arguing about the Titanic as it's coming up in an iceberg, and you're arguing about the color of the deck chairs. I mean, we are going over a cliff, and we're not fixing it by putting, you know, Band-Aids. You're not going to, the technology is not going to fix diabetes. Nutrition is, you know, this is.
Yeah, you're essentially dealing with the problem when it's already gotten to a point where you're in the hospital.
Yeah, I mean, there's, you know, like I said, there's a guy, Peter Attia, I don't know if you know who he is, but he talks about when he was a surgeon, he felt like he was at the bottom of a building and somebody's throwing eggs off, and his job is to catch the eggs.
Oh, God.
Right? And he's like, well, why don't we just have the guy stop fucking throwing down eggs? But that's what medicine is. You're just catching the eggs. And so instead of that, we should be investing, you know, we talk about prevention, but it's bullshit. We don't do anything for prevention. It's so little. And then the problem is a lot of it is it doesn't work the way we've designed it, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot of money in fixing you. And there's not a whole lot of money in telling you to eat well.
No, there's not. There's not at all.
But it is a changing climate, though, because of people like Chris Kresser and Rob Wolf and Dr. Rhonda Patrick and a lot of others. They're giving out really good nutrition advice, and people are changing the way they eat and think about food, and it's having a massive effect on the inflammation that they carry in their body. I know so many people that used to have joint pain. A great example is the Primal Kitchen, Mark Sisson's book, which is fantastic, and his story, Mark's story about having his own inflammatory issues with his hands. He had some pretty severe arthritis that he thought was just going to be with him forever. He changes his diet, reduces all the refined carbohydrates, goes on this protein, high-fat diet, and it all goes away. I mean,
totally.
There's so many examples of that, and I just watched this documentary called What's with Wheat, and it's all about glyphosate in the wheat, Roundup, and how when they say it's safe for people to consume, they say, well, it only affects plants and bacteria. They're like, well, what about your microbiome? Your microbiome is filled with bacteria, and you're killing that stuff. Like, we don't think of that as being an issue. You know, we don't think of sedentary lifestyle as being an issue when it comes to the ultimate cause for you to wind up in the hospital needing surgery. But it absolutely is.
No, it is. I can tell you one of the things I used to see, because, you know, when you're a surgeon, you like somebody comes in with bad arthritis and you replace their knee and they feel better for a while. And you're like, oh, that's great, man. I really helped this person. Then they come in next year and their other knee is all jacked up. And then you're going to replace that. Well, you should have just done something so they didn't need arthritis, didn't need surgery on the other time. That's
I've had conversations with people that their dad needs an artificial knee, and I'm like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Are you sure? Like, yeah, he's limping bad. I mean, he really can't take it anymore. Like, have you exhausted all possible options? Like, what have you done about the diet? Oh, he won't. He's not into that. He's not into that. Okay.
Well, here's the problem, because no one's demonstrated that diet works, but I will tell you, and this is you know.
Well, no one's demonstrated it in terms of like scientific.
Right, but I will tell you that, you know, just, you know, because I told you, because I'm a freak, because I'm just eating meat and I'm doing this athletic stuff, and everybody says you're an outlier, you're a genetic freak, whatever.
Right.
You're an N equals 1. So we made this website called N equals many. Me and this other Air Force guy that he's also a carnivore. We got this thing. We said, well, what if people started gathering this information together and we could start documenting that? And that's what we did. So I put out a survey on Twitter. I said, hey, how many of you guys would be willing to go 90 days and just eat a bunch of steaks? And I had like 400, and I didn't have that many followers, but I had like 400 people. Yeah, we'll do it.
That's amazing.
So we developed this website, and it's called nequalsmany.com for people who want to see. So we developed this website, and we start getting these first
N equal sign or EQ?
No, EQ spelled. I don't think you can put an equals on a website.
No.
NEQUALS.
Okay.
Many.com.
Right.
So we do this, and we get all these people that sign up, and we ended up having about close to 100 people just do 90 days of just eating meat. And then and again, there's a lot of scientific things you can criticize about this. You know, it's just guys ate meat.
Anecdotal study.
But, you know, when we got done, and I've got the results, so we just, you know, we're still analyzing the data, because we're all doing this for free, and we're trying to get people to help us analyze the data, and, you know, but of these 100 people, you know, there's about 85 actually. Of these people, we asked them, what happened to your general health? What happened to your sexual health? What happened to your exercise capacity? What happened to your GI health, your skin?
Right.
Everything. We asked all these questions. And there was maybe 1% where they said it got worse. 99% got better, much better, or stayed the same. You know, so it was just like unanimously everybody got, pretty much either the same or
Is
better.
it possible that there's some bias in that group because they're following you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm well aware of that.
Right.
And that's but it's interesting. But then we're getting some lab data, because I know you like about lab data. So I get people, and I don't have access to all the data, and I didn't want it. I didn't want to have access to the data. I don't want to bias myself against it. So I'm getting fed the data, and I'm seeing that people's blood pressure is normalizing. People's hemoglobin A1C, which is measure glucose, is normalizing. People's inflammation markers are normalizing. All these markers of disease are going in the right direction. We're just seeing good stuff, because a lot of the people will say meat causes diabetes, meat causes hypertension.
See, the only time I've ever seen meat causes diabetes is in that wacky What the Health documentary, which has been widely disproven.
Yeah.
We wrote a whole piece about that, debunking that, and like how much stuff in that is like fake science. Like what they're saying about meat causing diabetes, there's no evidence of that.
Yeah, I mean, they use some associational stuff, and that's all they ever do. I mean, it's like some associational stuff.
Yeah, but they're putting it out as if it's 100% factual and like sounding the alarms, like this is what's causing diabetes, it's meat. Meanwhile, they're completely ignoring the consumption of all these refined carbohydrates these people are eating with the meat.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, that's totally true. I mean, and so one of the things that's so nice about studying these people that are just eating meat, I mean, you isolate. That's the only variable you got to isolate. So we know what happens when you just eat meat.
Now, are they allowed to take supplements during the time?
Yeah, we had some. What we said
They have
was
to document it?
Yeah, we had them document stuff, and some of them did. Some, it was kind of like one of those things where because we'd never done this before, and we made them document all kinds of stuff. And a lot of people, some of the people initially dropped out because we made them document too much stuff. Like it's too much of a hassle. I can't record all this stuff. So we had a certain percent that dropped out because they just didn't want to document stuff. We had a certain percentage that dropped out because they felt like they had low energy, right? And so a lot of people, when they do this, they just can't eat very much. I mean, they get full and they're not eating enough. And so that's one of the biggest things I tell people when they switch over to this: eat meat like it's your job. That's what I tell them. You got to eat initially.
But shouldn't they just eat until they're not hungry anymore?
Well, the problem is a lot of people lose weight on this. A lot of people get lean on this stuff. Is that your hunger goes down pretty low because you're eating a lot of fat and you're eating a lot of protein. Especially if you're eating ribeye steaks. That's probably about 70% fat, 30% protein, something like that. So I mean, it's really, really satisfying. And so they tend to under, because no one's used to, like, if I told you, Joe, go eat 4 pounds of meat a day, you're going to be like, well, I mean, I know you like eating meat, but I mean, even that's probably a big task.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, and so to get used to that, it takes a while.
Yeah.
It depends on your activity level, because I work out pretty damn hard, and I do it pretty often. So, I mean...
Yeah, you do some crazy shit, man. I saw you box jumps.
Yeah, I mean, this is, like I said, this is, back to that glycolytic stuff I do. I mean, my capacity to exercise is great. And one of the things is because
you felt no difference. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you felt no difference between going from the ketogenic diet to eating meat, or did it feel like you had more energy?
I had more energy. I had better libido. You wake up every day. You're ready to go. It's like, I've had a couple people that, and I haven't tested this, but I've had a couple people that have done this. And again, we need to get more data. I've had a couple people who've done it and said their testosterone level went up. They went on all meat. Their testosterone went up about 20%. And so I was like, well, that's interesting. I don't put a lot of faith in just a couple of anecdotes.
But that happens to a lot of people that go on the ketogenic diet because the cholesterol is actually the precursor for testosterone.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. If you look at, red meat consumption in the U.S. since about 1977, so red meat has gone down about 30 to 40%.
Really?
Yeah. We used to eat way more in the 70s. We ate about 30 to 40% more red meat than we do now.
No kidding.
Yep. And also our testosterone levels have dropped significantly. Population testosterone levels have dropped about that same amount.
I thought people ate a lot of red meat. I would have never imagined we eat less now.
We ate way less than we used to.
Wow.
Yeah. So here's another interesting fact. Hong Kong, right? Hong Kong right now, if you Google Hong Kong life expectancy, they live the longest out of anybody in the world, right? They eat about 40% more red meat than we do in the U.S. And they have the longest lived people in the world, which is interesting.
Yeah, I'd read something that said that 100% of all people that live over 100, no, it was some high number of all people that live over 100 consume red meat.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. It's interesting because, I know the vegans really like to point out Okinawa, it's a blue zone, and they eat a lot of vegetables. They looked at the people that lived over 100 in Okinawa. None of them were vegetarians. All of them ate meat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
There's not a lot of good solid evidence that being a vegan is a solution to a long life.
Well, I mean, obviously there's different propaganda out there. And I think, here's what I'd say. If you want to do veganism and it makes you healthy, fine. Most people can't do it. I mean, we know that about...
Right, but the thing is, we're not just talking about if you want to do it. We're talking about people that are proselytizing. Like, they have this idea, and they push this idea down everybody's throats. But if we're just looking at the actual data, the health data, like what's good for you and what's bad for you, there's no like overwhelming evidence that the vegan way is the way to go.
No, there's not. I mean, there are studies they like to push, but there's also studies that show the the opposite effect. If you look at the Epic Oxford study, which had about 60,000 people in it, they showed that vegetarians and vegans live no longer than meat eaters. There's no difference, right? Even though the meat eaters are probably the guys that don't care about their health. True. So it may, not only is it not protective, it may be a negative. You can look at a study out of Australia that looked at 240,000 people called the 45 and up study. Same thing. Vegans, vegetarians, no longer life, no better health. And so it's kind of like, who do you believe? And these guys have their studies that they're going to quote. And I can cherry pick all day, and other people can cherry pick all day. It's just BS. So my best advice is, and this is, I think, the best advice you can give anybody, until we start seeing dudes walking around that are in shape and jacked at 120 years old, you're not going to know what the right thing to do is. And so the best advice you can have is to get strong, get healthy, move well, do everything you can to make your health good. And that's the best you can do, because if you're healthy today, odds are you're going to be healthier tomorrow. So, the fact that, Joe, you're still got a lot of muscle on you at 50 means you're more likely to have some when you're 60. I mean, there's just no doubt. That's the biggest correlator. One of the best predictors of long life is your exercise capacity.
And I think we should bring this up while we're talking about vegan diets versus other diets. If you have a standard American diet of even eating a bunch of shitty food and fried chicken and bullshit and cheeseburgers and sodas, and you go vegan, you will be healthier.
Sure.
Because you're going to remove all that shitty processed food out of your diet, all the nitrites, all the stuff that's unnecessary, all the preservatives. If you do that, you will be healthier. But it doesn't necessarily mean the vegan diet is the way to go. I mean, it means that the American diet that everybody like rightly criticizes is the wrong way to go. Vegan diet's certainly better than that.
Yeah, I mean, you can do about any diet's better than that. I mean, it's like in a lot of things. This is another point I bring out. Because one of the differences between what I sort of think is healthy, and I'll come out and say I don't know for sure. I'm still learning this stuff, but I'm willing to investigate it. I'm willing to put my body to the test and have other people, give me data. But there's a big group out there that says you shouldn't eat a lot of protein. You should really restrict your protein. There's some data that talks about something called mTOR that, maybe, it causes cancer. Maybe it inhibits longevity in these lesser animals like mice and, little tadpole nematode things and, bacteria.
Right.
And then there's another group of scientists out there. There's a guy named Stuart Phillips out of Canada that's looking at that. And it shows that the more protein you have, especially when you get older, the longer you're going to preserve muscle, the better your quality of life is, and likely the longer you're going to live. And so, what happens if you autopsy an old person? If you get somebody and you go to an old folks' home, their brain has shrunk. I mean, their muscles have shrunken away. The protein in their bones have shrunken away. Their kidneys have shrunk. Their heart has shrunk. Their skin has shrunk. Everything's shrunk because it's lost all this protein. And what happens is, as you get older and older, you lose some of the capacity to digest meat. And so what happens is, where does your body get that protein from? It just starts taking it from yourself. You start auto-cannibalizing yourself to sustain function, to sustain cellular function. So if you're not getting that replaced, through diet, and meat is an outstanding source of that, you're going to be frailer and frailer. We have an obesity epidemic, but we also have a frailty epidemic. There are people that are just, by the time they're 40, they may be obese, but they're weak as can be.
There's so many people that are just, sedentary lifestyle is one of the biggest killers of your body, for sure. And there's so many people that you look at them, like, I was talking to a guy the other day, and it looked like you could just grab his arm and pull it off his body. Like, his shoulders were sunken. There was, like, no muscle tone at all. He had no exercise. There was none in his life, ever. Yeah. Like, maybe they made him do gym in high school, and that was it. And he's just younger than me, and he was falling apart.
You and I at 50 are like, the bar for a healthy 50 or normal 50-year-old is, way down low, and, we're like total outliers. Just the fact that we exercise and have a little muscle, that puts you in the 99th percentile right
and
there.
It's interesting if you just continue it. The thing about it is, like, if I take a week off, man, boy, do I feel it more at 50 than I did at 30.
Yeah, no,
it's
absolutely.
crazy.
Yeah, that's true.
But I could still get back in shape.
Yeah.
And once you get back in shape, you just got to keep it going. And if you just keep it going, it will work for you. Your body, it's what we compare. It's really interesting. Because what we compare in terms of normal body function, like the normal capacity that your body has, we're really generally looking at people that are just the average person. Well, the average person doesn't really exercise very hard. They don't. So we don't have a lot of data on people that are in their 50s that still go, you know what? I'm not letting this go. Yeah. I'm going to keep this fucking body strong. I'm going to make sure I lift heavy weights. I'm going to do hard cardio. I'm going to do sprinting and kickboxing and a bunch of shit that requires explosive energy. And if you do that, your body can stay vibrant. But you have to be diligent. It's very important for people to understand this. This is not, if you're just a casual person who just kind of like half-asses, oh, maybe I'll take a spin class. Good luck, bitch. Your body's going to die. It's going to rot off and fall apart. But if you just decide to be militant about this, you can keep a functional body far longer. And it's not just about ego. It's also just about the use of your meat vehicle. Like, my body could do a lot of shit that most people's bodies can't. Like, if I want to pick something up, I don't have to call somebody. I just pick it up. You know, and that, just that alone, you know, to know that you can carry yourself, to know that you can do 50 chin-ups, to know that you can move your body around in a way that most people find to be almost impossible. It's like, I want my body to work better. You know, it's like having a race car and you can choose what horsepower engine it is based on how much work you put on it. I mean, that's essentially what your body is. You can choose how much tread you have in your tires. You can choose how good the suspension is, how supple it is, and how well it can maneuver based on how much plyogenic exercises you do, or how many different explosive maneuvers, you know, clean and presses and things along those lines. You can get that body to work right.
Yeah, I think that, you know, if you look at animals in the wild, right, you know, if you're looking at a pack of animals getting hunted, which one's going to get killed? You know, which one are they going to pick out?
The frail.
The slow, weak one, right?
Yeah.
The old one. So if you're a human, and we don't get hunted by lions, but if you're a human, if you say, you know, when was my peak athleticism? You know, maybe 25, maybe 30, you know, somewhere in there, 30, 35, somewhere in there, that's your top performance for most people.
Yeah.
The closer you can maintain to that ability, as long as you possibly can, and do whatever it takes to get there, the farther you are away from death. I mean, that's just simple nature. You know, the slow, the weak, they get eaten, they die, they get disease, they become disabled. I don't want to be I'm 50 now. I don't want to be a 60-year-old guy that's walking around, limping around, you know, needing assistance, somebody that, you know, lift my groceries for me. And that's what we have. Or even a woman. I mean, women should be out there strength training, getting stronger, swinging heavy kettlebells, jumping. That's the other thing that you brought up, explosiveness, because I think we're finally starting to, you know, we finally went away from jogging, right? You know, we went from the 1960s to the, you know, early 2000s, everybody's jogging. That's what you do for health. Then people started discovering strength training. So now we get people that are in there lifting a little bit. But I think what you also have to do, and this is something, because I've got this little training system that, you know, I'm helping people with. But I think you have to do the explosive work too. And so I do, you know, I get in there with medicine balls. And I think a lot of people underuse it. I take medicine balls and I try to break the fucking things. I mean, I throw them as hard as I can. You know, I'm jumping. Like I said, I'm jumping with a vest on. You know, the stuff you have to build up to, and it has to be done in a safe manner. You know, and I'm sprinting. I'm on an Airdyne bike. Have you been on an Airdyne, Joe?
Yeah, I love those.
Those are the. You know, I was going to say, you got to get one for here.
Yeah, we're getting one.
Yeah, good. I was going to say, you know, here's what I'll tell you. Have you bought one yet?
ones. No.
No. Here's what I would tell you to do.
Okay.
There's a company called Octane Fitness. It makes an Airdyne X. It's probably better than that Air Assault bike.
Really?
Yeah.
Pull that up.
Octane.
What's it called? Octane Fitness?
It's called
Airdyne X?
Airdyne X. I mean,
What's better about it?
It's just solid. I mean, it's solid as can be. I mean, and it's just you just, you know, in my view, you know, because I've done everything training. I mean, I've broken world records on the concept too, so I know how to do the intense stuff. That Airdyne, those type things, are the best thing you can do for those short sprints. I mean,
There it is right there.
Yeah, they're so metabolically demanding. I mean, I don't know if they charge. I mean, I think they're...
The only thing that I've always had reservations about is like the sitting down part.
As far as what?
Well, I feel that like you would get more exercise if you're supporting your body weight.
Well, I mean, you know, there's a ski erg, you can do stuff like that, you know.
Right.
But I mean, if you get on that thing and you go as hard as you fucking can for 30 seconds or a minute's even worse. Every time I do it for a minute, I feel like I'm literally going to drown. I'm going to die. You know, it's just like, because here's what I do. I call these things chainsaw intervals. So I tell people, pretend there's some fucking maniac with a chainsaw. It's going to cut you up, and you got to go as hard as you can. You know, I don't have that at home. I've got the regular air down version. I keep raking the damn thing because I go too hard. You know, it's just not strong enough. But when I go to the commercial gym, there's a guy that they just made that, and they had me doing that. There's another MMA guy that, man, I can't remember his name, but he was like a Pride champion guy, like Pride 6 or 7 that won it, and he's at the gym I'm at sometimes in Southern California. But I mean, that thing is, you know, just try. You have those. I'm sure those guys would come up here and let you demo it, you know, and just get on there and go, you know. And this is the thing I talk about when I talk about high intensity interval training. You know, a lot of people, they don't get the high intensity part. You know, they'll do Tabatas where they'll go 90%, 100% of the first one, and then by the time the third one, they're down to like 60%.
Right.
Because the rest intervals are too short. So I'm like, man, go like somebody's going to kill you for 20 seconds, and then rest 3 or 4 minutes, and then go again, because then you keep hitting that high intensity.
That's what I do with exercise when it comes to weightlifting. I take big breaks now.
Yeah.
I used to, for weightlifting, I used to try to burn myself out.
Yeah.
Go to failure, short is like if I get 30 seconds break, all right, come on, next set.
I mean, I
don't do that anymore.
Yeah, the problem with that is you're just tired. And that's not what you're training at the time. Now, there's a time to do the training. You know, like I said, you know, when I break it up, when I tell people how to train, I'm like, look, you train it for explosivity. That's the only thing you care about. You don't get tired because you're gonna waste. You're not going to be as tense enough. The same thing with the sprinting. The same thing with the lifting. Give yourself enough of a break so that you can focus and do what you need to do. Then when it's conditioning time, then you can go get tired and do that shit. And so,
do it with light weights.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the problems with, like, you know, and I think CrossFit, there's a lot of good elements to there. I mean, there's a lot of people that do well with that, but some of the exercises they pick, you know, like when you get tired doing snatches, the odds of you getting fucked up are high.
Very high.
So I tell people, do something that's, you know, it's hard and it's tiring. And when you get tired and your form breaks down, you're not going to get hurt. You know, so you may do medicine ball slams.
Right.
But if you're jumping up and down on a box and then you fuck up, now your shin's bloody. You know, what's the point of that? So I mean, I just have a, you know, I've been
battle ropes are a great one for that too.
Yeah,
There's no consequence to being too exhausted.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the way to do that. And I've been training now for almost 40 years, Joe, and I haven't taken a week off. I've taken a week off is all. You know, I'll take a week off. And the same thing with you, I know, is you take too much time, you just don't feel good. And that's the other thing about this diet. My recovery capacity is huge. I mean, I can train super intense every single day, you know, without a break, which is kind of nice. I mean, this is the other thing that I get people telling me all the time is, you know, they're hitting PRs on deadlifts. They're doing all this
personal
stuff.
record for non-athletes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not used to, you know what I'm talking about. But I mean, it's like, you know, I get these people all the time. They're like, man, I'm hitting push-up records, chin-up records. My deadlift went up 100 pounds in 3 months from just eating meat and stuff like that. So I think there's something to it. I mean, I have people that are telling me, I put my dad on this diet, right? He's 74 years old. 2 months into the diet, he goes, hey, man, this is the biggest my biceps ever been in my life. And he's just eating meat.
That's crazy.
So he's just putting on muscle just because he's taking in so much animal tissue. So,
well, listen, man, keep us posted on this. Keep me posted on like how your own personal journey's gone and whatever evidence that you collect with other people. And I'm very curious. I'm curious about this. I might give it a try for 1 month.
Yeah, here's what I'll tell you, Joe. So January is World Carnivore Month, right?
Oh, Jesus.
So we're trying to get as many people. We can get thousands of people on there and just give us your data at n=many.com. Just do a month in World Carnivore Month. There's instructions on how to do that. And just submit your day.
So are you allowed to eat anything else?
Yeah. So I tell people you can eat meat, eggs, dairy, you know, cheese. You know, you can drink coffee, stuff like that. We didn't
but just no vegetables for a month.
No fruits and vegetables for a month. No plants for a month. You can you can put a little seasoning on.
I'm gonna give it a chance. I'll give it a chance. I'll try some month. 1 month. I don't know if I can do January. Well, I'll try to find a month.
Tell me if you need help, Joe. I'll help you.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. Man, that was great. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. That's fine. Thank you.